order to meeting. Everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first item this evening is public comments. Mr. Tommel?
I'd like to ask for maybe some updates on a few items that the board has taken up previously.
Dates?
No, this is good.
Where are we with the act of the legislature divesting ourselves from new hires in the police department that won't be hired in the civil service? Do you have anything on that?
Stole my question.
Okay, Kevin, can you help Vic with that answer?
Yeah, the latest update is it's passed the Public Service Committee, and it is now in the screening committee. It should move through screening pretty quickly, at which time it'll enter the chambers for official vote.
Do you have any kind of a timeline?
It's been tough to get a timeline. But the biggest holdup was Public Service Committee. It was heard at Public Service Committee. It wasn't voted on because it wasn't a full committee. It then finally was. I think it was officially voted at the Public Service Committee like July 29th, 30th, somewhere around there. And it's now in screening.
Okay, and we had a big go around here for several months about the water situation, the work that runs along Hayes Street, under Waltham Street, and we got the Department of Environmental Protection involved, and there were certain recommendations that they made, one of them being that they were going to put a camera in the pipe. And I'm wondering where that is, what kind of a schedule do you have to alleviate the problem, or have you come to any conclusions, or anybody come to a conclusion?
Mr. Chair, you want me to speak on that too?
Yes, please.
So currently, first of all, DEP came with very minimal recommendations and came with 0 recommendations on funding sources. Aside from that, we've investigated potential grant opportunities that are out there, including most recently in July attending one from MEMA that they offer as a hazard mitigation potential grant program. The entire drain system was cambered. That included that entire area. That has all been cambered. We now have the report and the results of that, and we've engaged with our consultant engineer, Stantec. Stantec is doing a full assessment of that and is going to be making some recommendations on potential, to address the issues. But at the end of the day, we're talking significant dollars to address it. So we don't know the full extent of what. There definitely was some breaks and cracks and roots, things like that they were able to address the roots while they were doing the camera, but there's other areas that we may have to look at putting sleeves in and some other remedies. So right now, we should in the next few weeks or so have some recommendations from Stantec, our engineering firm.
And the other thing I'd like to ask about is the Monsoon Restaurant that hasn't been operating as a going entity now for some months, and we had a gentleman in here a couple times, and he said something about, well, his first excuse was he couldn't hire a chef. And I think the present chair questioned him, and he said something about that he was busy remodeling a restaurant, one of the properties he owned in another town. And I'm just wondering where that's going to end up. I notice you have a post out there on another liquor establishment. We seem to be having one hell of a problem with a heavily regulated industry, and I'm just wondering what we have in a Monsoon, because it seems to me, I think there was a timeline on that too the last time the gentleman was in.
So, Mr. Chair, I can speak to that too.
Yes.
The Board of Selectmen voted to revoke that license. The owner, property holder of that license was given notice. They then had an opportunity to appeal to the ABCC, the board's decision. They did not, so that license became available. We made it available to our first applicant that we had in our database, which was the Whole House Group, who was actually scheduled for hearing on August 18th for a new license application, which is that particular license for an all-alcohol license at the Battle Road Brewery Pub.
So that license is no longer with the Monsoon.
That's correct.
Thank you.
We
Thank
got-
you, Mr. Chairman.
We got one right.
Well, I want to tell you, it's pretty tough, and we have some pretty tough decisions to make. If you don't start hardballing them, they're going to roll all over you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other public comments this evening? Okay. Item number 2 on the agenda is we have 2 sets of minutes to approve.
Sorry.
And the first set of minutes is I make a motion to accept and approve the minutes of the July 7th, 2015 as shown. Is there a second?
Second?
Any comments from the board? All in favor of approving the minutes, July 7th?
Thank you.
The second set of minutes?
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd request that we defer the minutes for July 21st until the next meeting for
Okay.
revision.
Okay.
Thank you.
The minutes of the 21st of July are deferred to our next meeting. Third item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Correspondence, items A through N. Make a motion to accept and approve the list of correspondences as shown, A through N. Is there a second?
Second.
Kim, second?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir?
Item number N, Master Development Notice of Project Sharing. What does that involve? I would imagine it's on Chandler Street Extension, maybe, I don't know.
That was the one that we were working on a house at the end of, what, Chandler Street, is it?
Yes.
I believe that's a
36 Chandler Street.
Fresh my memory.
Yes.
Kevin, could you clarify the work, is the work on Chandler, or is it, it seemed to me it was a refinancing of various
That's
properties
exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it
for a
was.
project that is not actually within the limits of the town of Maynard.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments on the correspondence items, A through N? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the correspondence items? 5. Item 4 is the consent agenda. Reappoint. Can you help me out what they're being reappointed to?
Cultural Council.
Okay. Okay. Motion to approve the consent items as shown, A through D.
Second.
Any comments? All those in favor? Okay. Request for a Class 2 dealer license, George Pierce. The a motion before us to accept and approve the request for a Class 2 dealer license for used vehicles for George R. Pierce, DBA Pierce Auto,
Yes.
at 81 Parker Street.
Yeah.
Mr. Pierce.
Mhm.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Pierce? Can I see that?
What do you need? Oh. What is your plan? And
Well, I've been buying and selling cars for over 30 years. I do it as a hobby. And recently, I do a lot of antique hot rods and that type of thing. And I need the license to be able to go and, if I want to purchase a vehicle at an auction, and that type of thing. There won't be any automobiles in the yard for sale, nothing like that. Whatever, there'll be one vehicle at a time. It'll be in the garage. I do the thing. Most of my business is done online and that sort of thing. It's,
Just to educate me a bit, so anybody who is like because we have the Maynard Auto Club that does,
Yeah.
you know, the old-time cars. If any one of those guys want to go buy a vehicle at a show, they need a license for that? I'm kind of confused. Is this because you're going to sell?
At an auction. If you go to strictly an auction that sells older cars, hot rods, street rods, that type of thing, yeah, you have to be able to bid on it and purchase a car at an auction. You can't even, most of them, you can't even bid on them unless you have a dealer license.
Would you be selling these vehicles then from your lot, or are you just going to be the owner and driving them around for fun?
No, I will sell them, but I'll sell them online. I mean, I won't be putting them out front in my driveway.
Yeah. Okay.
It's something that won't even be noticed.
So this is one vehicle at a time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then my other question would be for Kevin. Do you know anything about the zoning issues? Are there any?
Yeah, so I've spoken with the zoning enforcement officer. It's currently zoned S2. This particular application would be looked at as a customary home business occupation. There'd be one vehicle that would be garage. So the only recommendation would be that the board, put those restrictions with the use of this license as far as that everything be located, within the garage, nothing be
Sure.
stored outside,
Oh, yeah.
those types of things. I
Yeah.
believe we have one other in town,
7 Mill Street, I think.
Mill
it
Street
is.
has one, a similar license, but as long as it's followed as to what the applicant has proposed to the zoning enforcement officer, that there be one vehicle at a time, that it always be garaged, there'll be no sale or
No, I don't wanna
visitors
put
that will
nothing
be
out.
showing up.
I don't want
so-
anything outside.
That's why we have these hearings, to
Yeah.
clear up those.
Yeah, there'll be, and the other piece to that, there'd be no other workers on site beyond
No.
yourself, yeah, so.
I'm fine.
Okay, anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, so 81 Parker Street's your primary residence?
Yeah.
So where in relation is 81 Parker Street? Give me a landmark.
Right next to the boys' club
Right next to the
on
Boys
Parker
Club?
Street.
And there's an actual garage there already for the
Oh, yeah.
vehicles to be in, yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
Is that was that new construction or renovation?
Gutted and rebuilt
Yeah.
inside.
Renovation, yeah, okay,
Looks very nice, by the way.
Thank you.
I know you guys did all the work.
yeah, that's right.
Kevin? Jason?
No, based on the response to David's questions and the recommendations from the zoning enforcement officer, I don't have anything else.
Tim?
Do we have a cap on how many of these we can give out? Just curious.
No, there's no quota prescribed.
Any further discussion? Okay, so the motion is to accept and approve the request for a Class 2 dealer license for used vehicles. George R. Pierce, DBA Pierce Auto at 81 Parker Street. Second.
Second?
Any further comments? All those in favor?
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Good luck.
Thanks, they'll be available tomorrow,
What time?
either before 8 o'clock or after 9.
Before.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
You guys want to sign that?
Sure.
Oh, here. Paper.
Okay.
Okay. Item number 6 are board opening interviews, and it's for a planning board, alternate member, 1 opening, and there are 3 interested parties, and they will go in order that they are on the agenda. And the first interviewee is Brendan Chetwin.
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay. Jason, do you have any questions?
Typically, we open these with an opportunity for the candidate to express a little bit of their interest in why they're applying, and
We have that, but if you can expound on it a little bit, Brendan, since we have it in writing, but go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Chairman, appreciating the time constraints of this evening.
Good.
As I think many are familiar with my municipal experience, I will try to provide a brief summary so that all parties are at the same level. I initially served on the Maynard Planning Board from 2002 to July of 2002 to June of 2009, a total of 7 years with over 4 years as its chair. Served on a variety of subcommittees at the time, not the least of which was the Community Development Planning Committee and the Community Preservation Committee as the Planning Board's representative. I also served 5 years on the Board of Selectmen and participated in a number of planning activities at that time. After I left the Board of Selectmen, I will say that I've taken a bit of a pause from municipal service. I did serve briefly on the Economic Development Committee, but also have informally provided technical advice and sort of historical knowledge to Bill Nemser, the town planner, just because I've gathered that over the years. My motivation in looking to rejoin the planning board is I feel that I have a lot of technical knowledge to contribute to the community still, and certainly I think one of the things in the many years that I've served that I think is important to a board of that type is ensuring that the process is sound. I've seen the benefits of good, solid process, and I've seen the benefits of poorly executed process, and have personally participated in both kinds. And I offer to the board that there's some value in knowing both, and I look to continue to serve the community in this capacity.
When you refer to technical knowledge, can you explain what you mean by technical knowledge, where insofar as the planning board is concerned?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So when I speak to technical knowledge, it's technical knowledge around planning board process, the zoning bylaws, the sort of process behind public hearings, generally how zoning works, how it intersects with Massachusetts general law. That's what I refer to as technical knowledge.
Okay. And the second question I have is, if one, not necessarily myself, but if one was to suggest that in your time, either on the planning board or the board of selectmen, the largest project in town went nowhere and dragged on and on and on as a result of the poor process that you were part of, how would you respond to that?
So I would say, Mr. Chairman, that I participated in that project over the course of 10 years. Part of my time participating, and I'll just be specific, 129 Parker Street, and there's no need to be ambiguous. During the initial engagement with I won't say the original owners, but Mr. John Walters, nominally back in 2003, 2004, forgive me, I forget the exact date, we developed the initial neighborhood business overlay district. That was through a very collaborative process that engaged the community in a variety of ways, and I'm sure many of you know the details. The lack of success on that particular phase of the program was contributed to a multitude of factors, not the least of which was some of the economic burden Mr. Walters was under, shall we say, as well as there was some outstanding litigation that prevented the project moving forward. Several years later, when I served on the Maynard Board of Selectmen, the new owners came forth to the community and are still before the community considering changes. The specifics of when I spoke of bad process, I think the process the first time around was good in some regards and bad in others. Good in the fact of how we engaged the community in various vignettes, planning sessions, working meetings, so on and so forth. I would offer that some of the bad parts of it perhaps, and again, by no means is this the sole contributing factor to the failure of the first phase of the project, shall we say, or the first go-around, was some of the time involved. I'm not sure necessarily how that could have been done better, because to have a deliberative, engaged process, you need to have time. What is the sweet spot of that balance? I think that's a subject of some debate. On the flip side, let me speak to the failed process that I think we're probably more familiar with, is the most recent, in the last several years, process that we executed on Parker Street. And if the chair would indulge, I can certainly be specific about what I learned, but I think there's several examples that failed. Now, as far as, is that solely my doing? No, I think there were many
Not
factors.
suggesting that.
I certainly had a part to play. But I think there's lessons that can be learned from failures and successes, as I think we all know. And so that's my thought on that.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Jason?
Obviously, Brendan and I've served on boards together, and I know Brendan pretty well. So, I guess I do have one question. I will throw it out to all the candidates tonight, and then I'll filter through it a little since I know some of your answers. Do you feel zoning review should be based on reviews conducted at meetings of the planning board, or based on establishing a set of rules that all persons must follow, with clarifications, waivers, change requests being heard by the board? So to boil that down, do you think everything should be done in a sitting meeting with the board, every T crossed, every I dotted, every piece of a project discussed right in front of the board? Or should we have a set of rules that are established in the zoning that, unless you want to change, that so we can actually get some people going on things rather than spending all of their time and money in front of our various boards?
So I'm going to offer this probably, that's a complicated question, and I think the answer is a mix of yes on both sides of it. So on one hand, I think you want zoning policy processes to be predictive to the degree they can be. And in order for them to be predictive, they need to be codified and communicated in a public fashion. But in some cases, there's going to be uniqueness to every project, and you need to provide the board some degree of latitude within the confines of the law to consider the unique aspects of that project. So I'm not sure that it can be codified to agree that it'll be 100% predictable, but I think there's constant need for improvement in the process as the board learns from experience of things that perhaps could have gone more efficiently. I don't know if that directly answers your question.
Sure.
David?
Yeah, I also know Brendan pretty well and have had the opportunity to work with Brendan on various projects. Beyond enforcement of the zoning bylaws, Brendan, what do you see as the role of the planning board?
So, just to clarify, Mr. Selectman, I would offer that enforcement of the zoning bylaws is actually the job of the zoning enforcement officer. I would offer to you that the planning board's role is twofold. Is more the regulation of the bylaw, and I'm not sure really that's the best word for it, but also, so it's a quasi-judicial body that has projects come before it that they have to rule on based on the way the bylaws and the various processes are called out. And in doing so, there's, again, as I mentioned earlier, some degree of subjective latitude, but when it comes down to the actual enforcement, once the planning board has executed a decision on a particular project, it's up to the zoning enforcement officer and potentially the planning board's hired consultants to ensure compliance with the plan and the law. But beyond that, I think the board has a role to be more proactive, and that includes developing forward-thinking policy in compliance with overall planning philosophy, shall we say, not the least of which are the community development principles to my right. Now, sometimes that's difficult, but I think that's another role of the board, is to be proactive versus solely a reactive board to Project X. So I think that's another role of the board.
Thank you.
Terrence?
Sure. Obviously, thank you, Brendan. I know you have a long history of serving the town, so it's always great. I know it takes a lot of time and commitment to do that, so I do appreciate that. I will say I'm slightly concerned with how you ended your selectman term last time. I think that was a burden on the town that could have been alleviated, so I think part of my decision stems from, you know, how your last role went, and that does trouble me, I will say that. But taking into account you've done planning board before, I know you have some experience with that and you've called out, but I still can't get past the, you know, what transpired last time when you were in a prominent position here, you know, as executive decision maker for the town. So that's still something that bothers me right now, thinking about appointing you to that position, so.
Based off that, I'm gonna go with what's in front of me, and I don't believe what happened in the past stems from judgment here tonight. So, again, thank you for your past service and your desire to come back to a position. But based on what I've seen, you've been in positions in the forefront of things. You've been planning board chair, selectman chair. Are you comfortable taking a lower, such as an alternate, not being in the forefront, just to serve?
Yeah, no, I don't think that I need to be chair, and frankly, the alternate isn't even eligible to serve in that role. My goal of coming back is, you know, I think I spoke to it a little bit earlier, is to ensure a sound process. And, you know, I think I can contribute as an individual member, as an alternate. I don't think I have to be in a leader, you know, in a leadership role. I don't have to run the meetings. That's not my goal of offering myself as a candidate.
And this goes for all candidates. Obviously, we have a ton of vacancies, and I hope you guys will continue to seek to be appointed to other positions. We're in a dire need. I'm sure we can all speak for our committees up here. So again, thank you for your interest.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gauze, please join us at the front. Is the other guy here? The third guy here?
It's on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Seems like yesterday I was here. As you can see from the enclosed resume that I submitted for consideration, I have experience in zoning and planning board matters and land use, general real estate law, finance. I've helped many clients in the past appear before zoning board of appeals, planning boards, licensing commissions. And my motivation for getting involved is I'd like to do something to help my own municipality out, my own town, and it'd be very interesting to actually sit on the other side of the table during a proceeding or an application. And I think I bring the experience from representing people and knowing what's involved in that as a resource for the planning board. And again, I moved here a couple of years ago, and I think now is the perfect opportunity, since I've moved my practice, splitting time between Cambridge and Maynard, and I see myself spending more time in Maynard as my practice evolves towards the Metro West area. So I have more time to devote towards these types of activities and volunteering my time. Did you say you had served on planning boards elsewhere? No, I've represented people who've submitted applications for That's, all right. subdivisions or site plan approval or permitting process involved in, multi-unit developments and so forth. But I haven't actually served on any boards. Okay. Jason, any questions?
Sure. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I guess, real quick, had you had a chance to attend? I know you were in, I think, just at the last meeting, so I wasn't sure. Did you have a chance to attend the planning board?
I have not attended a planning board meeting.
Okay. And I guess I'll try and clean up my question that I've asked the previous candidate, as far as, do you feel that sort of all of these reviews and all of these projects be hashed out, every piece in front of the full board for weeks and months, versus having a strong bylaw that can be interpreted, by right, and then come in for, with some flexibility to come in to speak to the board for changes?
I think that's a difficult question for me to answer at this time, since as far as the dynamic between, the planning department, what's going on in the town, I'm still familiarizing myself with different projects like 129 Parker, getting the background on that. What's going on with the clock tower and what's proposed there.
Mill and Main, as we call it here.
I'm all for a strong zoning code. There are, if you looked at it from a strictly legal standpoint, you've got the zoning code and you've got mechanisms for getting a variance or a special permit. But I understand, do you want to be tied up with every single little tiny variation or, something that might not actually, from a time constraint standpoint, be necessary to be heard before a board. I couldn't give you an answer for that, only because I'm not familiar enough with, I have perused the Maynard zoning bylaws, but I haven't, studied them in as much as I've studied other municipalities like Cambridge or Boston or Linfield or some of the other communities I've done work in. So at this point, I can't really tell you other than I'm all for a strong zoning bylaw, but I don't know, given my current knowledge, if what you're proposing as far as, little variations here or there, or if you've got some procedure in place to avoid coming before the board, if that, would be feasible given the town's current situation and what type of projects that would fall under.
Thanks.
David?
Thank you, welcome back. I've actually got the same question that I asked the first candidate, Brendan, for you, and I have a separate question, so I'm going to ask the separate question first, and then we'll go to the other question. Are you aware, given that you work in the legal field with with certain developers or whatever, of any entities that you've represented or been involved with that has any business in front of the town of Maynard at this time or any time in the past?
None whatsoever. Most of my client base is in the greater Boston, Cambridge area. I don't, and North Shore mainly. I don't have any current developers or clients that are working out in the Metro West area currently.
Okay, good. The follow-up question then, or this is the same question I asked of Brendan, which is, I'm going to leave out the first part that was erroneous in content, but what do you see as the role of the planning board?
I see the role of the planning board, there's we're supposed to, the planning board is supposed to, offer insight as far as proposals to the zoning code. Honestly, it's different for a lot of different municipalities. I know there's a vanilla definition for it, but depending upon where you actually appear before a planning board, and I must confess I haven't been in front of the planning board here in Maynard before, but I think it's an integral part of the community. It provides that stopgap between people trying to take advantage of the zoning code through, doing whatever it is that they want. Though you do have a zoning enforcement officer that would enforce the zoning code. But it's also, you have the ability as a member of the planning board to suggest proposals to change the zoning code. So there is a mechanism to work with what's for the greater good of the community as far as development, what the future of the community is going to look like, what projects ultimately get approved, and basically gives you the entire feel of the town when all is said and done. You are a member of that committee that's responsible for making sure that your town is productive and
that you attract the right types of business, and you've got, you know, that upward growth potential without being overly burdensome on the, you know, everyday developer or someone who wants to come in and establish a business or do a project. They want to be able to do that with minimal, you know, headaches. Obviously, there's oversight, but you don't want to be so obstructive as to turn people away. So I think that the planning board plays an important part in that, in the overall scheme of things.
Thank you.
Tim?
You have 3 projects come before you, and all will bring this town, pave the streets with gold, so to say. How do you decide which one is the best fit and to bring your recommendations to the other boards?
You've got to take a whole, it's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, everything is, it's dependent upon the circumstances, what the applicants are proposing, what the town, what the residents of the town feel is appropriate. You've got to take that into consideration. There's many factors that go into it. I think you have to take the totality of the circumstances when you ultimately decide what way to proceed. So it's not an easy question to answer. If it were, I don't think you know, planning boards would have much use. So it would be pretty straightforward. You want to put something in, and someone would do it.
Terrence?
Yes. In your experience, you had mentioned you work with other municipalities with their planning boards and stuff. What do you see as the biggest challenges from when you were representing clients when they dealt with municipalities? I know you said you don't have a history with Maynard here, which is fine. I'm just trying to gauge from your experience factor what you've seen as challenges that most clients, whether they're developers or individual residents, face when they deal with municipalities from your point of view.
Depending upon the project, it could be, you know, roadblocks set up, put up by residents. It could be just, you know, I can't get into real specifics here, but just a project that doesn't fit in the town, a proposal for something that is so far beyond what the zoning code allows that to be permissive would just, there'd be no way it could be approved or should be approved. You know, there are different variables that come into play, different levels of pushback from either boards, residents, or other developers, and there's not really one single thing that I find from a few different municipalities that I've been before where I can put my finger on it. You kind of have to take everything and balance the interaction between the board, the developer, residents, other projects in the town, and take a more balanced approach and try, I don't want to give away any secrets or anything, but, you know, there's an approach that I use and other attorneys use when we want something that we think we can get, and it's a, you know, it's a give and take, so to speak.
So would it be fair to say that negotiation is a tactic that you obviously when you step into a meeting as an attorney representing somebody, you're going to negotiate with the planning board about things versus just there's rules and a process in place that actually that someone follows to a T. Is there always room for negotiation? Have you seen that in your history, or?
Not always. In some cases, it's point blank. It's either yes or no. Either they want it or they don't want it, or we are interpreting this such that the letter of the zoning code is, there's no room for movement on that. So I have had clients who have been shot down point blank before boards and commissions. So it's something that comes with the territory. You can't guarantee 100%, you know, success all the time. But like I said, it's a balanced approach. There's a method and a methodology in appearing before the board, and you know, I presume you have attorneys that appear before the planning board and the Board of Zoning Appeals all the time, and, you know, if I sat in, I would say, yes, I think I know what they're angling for based on what they're proposing or have submitted.
Last quick question, Mr. Chairman. Would it be fair to say you don't have, so you haven't been in Maynard a very long time compared to some other people in town, 3 years, I think you said, so.
Correct.
Would it be fair to say you don't have a bias based on past events that have happened in this town? You don't sway one way or another based on what's transpired in the past?
No, none whatsoever. I'm still learning the history of the town. And my neighbor across the street, he's lived in Maynard, what do you say, 50-some-odd years, has filled me in on some of the details, and he continually fills me in on a regular basis. So I find the history of Maynard is as interesting as it is colorful, so I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough, thank you.
Following up on Terrence's question, so it's safe to assume that your history and your experience as a lawyer on the other side of the planning board table would be a benefit to the town in some way?
I think so.
And I guess the other question is, being that on occasion you might be faced with somebody that's on the other side of the table that is also a member of the bar of which you're a member of, how does that play out?
I may or may not know the individual, that unless there was some sort of conflict of interest where I've worked with them directly in the past or am working with them on a current project, it shouldn't be of any concern.
Okay. Does anybody in the audience have any, well, we'll finish up with the next candidate, then we'll go to the audience about all three. So I think that's it, unless anyone else has any questions for Mr. Gauze. We'll get to Mr.
Thank you.
Hesback.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hesback. Did I pronounce your name right?
Hesbach.
Hesbach? Okay.
That's like the gas station, Buck like the Boozer.
Talk like the what? Oh, okay. Okay, well, can you fill us in as to why you'd like to be on the alternate for the planning board and what makes you qualified?
So this is my, I guess, second time coming to you guys for an appointment of this ilk. I currently serve on the Community Preservation Committee, and we are currently lacking a planning board alternate or planning board liaison to the CPC. So as being on the CPC and having worked with planning board's representative Linda Conley, and then knowing she stepped down from the CPC as that position, I'd look to fill that role. That's kind of what introduced me to the concept of coming, requesting to be on the planning board. Following that, though, there's, the town's at a crossroads. The town has many opportunities in front of it, and my experiences in the brief 5.5 years I've been here and watching some of the churn and burn that's been going on in the town, I'd like to take the opportunity to work with the CPC and the planning board to maybe take advantage of some of these opportunities we have coming ahead with, with the new mill and with some of the projects we have coming down with CPC, with the opportunities with downtown to fill some of the vacancies. It seems like a forward-thinking, proactive, community-focused planning board would be a very positive thing for the town. So I bring lots and lots of community volunteer experience, not in Maynard. Prior to moving to Maynard, I was involved in emergency medical services in Maryland, spent 20 years as a volunteer paramedic, ran the EMS system for a county of 100,000 people, 12 to 14,000 calls a year. My agency provided all the paramedic services, about 6,500 calls a year. So it's a very similar situation to what you have in Maynard with Pro EMS backing up the fire department. I ran the Pro EMS piece of it. So I've lots of experience in doing community service type work and working with county and local governments to ensure that the community is served in whatever means I'm filling. At that particular point in time, it was emergency services. Being in Massachusetts, that opportunity has unfortunately gone away, but I look for other vectors to channel myself in that direction, such as the CPC and now the planning board. So that's why I'm here before you guys tonight.
Okay. Would you remain on the CPC and the planning board?
Yes.
Be on both?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's up to the planning board in all honesty, because the planning board has to appoint a representative to the CPC. That position currently is vacant. So if selected, I would offer myself up for that position for the planning board as well.
Okay. And what do you mean by churn and burn? I kind of lost on that statement.
Kind
that
of
you made
lost on
open.
that. Okay, well, there seems to be a lot of activity going on with different zoning bylaws, which you would think would be a fairly static piece of the town coming up at town meetings, sometimes a couple times over. We have Economic Development Committee doing reviews of projects and hopefully making new recommendations. We have these community development principles that people like to reference and say, boy, we'd really like to leverage these community development principles. You see businesses downtown opening and closing in single-digit months time frame. So it seems like there's a lot of churn that's happening in the economic area of, in the heart of our downtown. So why is that? Do we not have the right set of zoning bylaws? Do we not have the right culture? Do we not have the right mindset? It looks like, we need some sort of fresh perspective as to what is bringing that to light. So, if you haven't seen all that activity, I'm kind of surprised, because it does seem like there's a lot of activity in that area.
Well, since you're applying to be on the planning board, I was taking the suggestion that there was a churn and burn that they were controlling in some way. That's how I took it. I took it as you were specifically referring to the planning board having a churn and burn aspect of it in and of itself. So that's how I took it, but thanks for clarifying it. Does anybody have any other questions? Tim?
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Doing well.
Haven't seen you in a while. I do like that you're trying to fill two positions. Obviously, he would have to resign from his current position if he were to get this one. So double appointments can't be made. Do you see any improvements that you think could be made to the planning board right now? And if so, what do you think you exactly bring to the table that would benefit the board?
So improvements to the planning board now, I can't speak to that because I haven't attended too many planning board sessions recently. My most recent one was when I worked on the co-op on the board of directors. I did attend a few several years ago while I was considering being on the planning board, but what I bring to the board would be a process-focused, engineering-focused mindset of understanding, being able to read a process, follow a process, look at opportunities to enhance, improve, better the process, and then make sure that, not only do you have the set of rules and boundaries and guidelines in front of you, but if there are opportunities to improve them, to streamline them, to make them more efficient so that the town can then be a more agile, yet in a very prescribed, constrained way. I have the ability to look at a system, in this case the zoning bylaws, and the town as an economic engine to figure out how you best optimize them to improve the use and the workflow.
If there was no immediate process or bylaw put in place to make a tough decision, how would you make that decision?
You analyze the risks. You draw a proverbial matrix of the boundaries where you want to, where this decision lies. Look for different risks and different things. An example, just out of the blue, off the top of my head, is if you had somebody wanting to build a ginormous building next to a conservation area, right? Well, if for some reason the zoning laws weren't clear for that parcel of land, then you would say, well, what's a risk? Well, the risk is drainage is going to affect the conservation area. So if I don't mitigate drainage, then I will have a problem with my wetlands. And then you'd, of course, establish a plan to mitigate the risk and then negotiate and work with the potential developer to see if that is within the grounds of the project, or if it's within the bounds of the zoning laws, if the zoning laws are sufficiently vague. And if it is within the bounds of the zoning laws, albeit not in the town's favor, as in we didn't think of that when we wrote the zoning bylaws, then presenting to the Board of Selectmen and the town the appropriate analysis of the risk and how you mitigate that risk. And if they make decision X, then this is the potential consequence. If they make decision Y, this is the consequence. I wouldn't say it's the planning board per se's decision to say this is how to go, but obviously you would make a recommendation based on what you consider the low risk solution, but it does require some sort of engineering analysis and risk presentation to the community so that they understand all aspects of it before they make a decision.
I've learned you're very detail oriented. Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the other two, but I want to clarify something.
Sure.
Currently, you are the Board of Selectmen's representative on the CPC, is that correct?
I believe I am an at-large member of the CPC,
Appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
appointed by the Board of
That's-
Selectmen.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
So in the event that you don't get appointed to this position tonight, you will not lose your position on the CPC and will remain there as our representative.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
It is not my intention to leave the CPC.
I
I'm
get
not doing this to leave the CPC. I'm doing this in the hopes that I could serve both
Enhance.
capacities.
Got it.
Obviously, I'd have to resign if I get appointed, but then hopefully the
Yeah.
planning board would appoint.
Gotcha. So you've heard the question, you have the benefit of being the third person. What do you see as the role of the planning board?
I think some of my previous comments kind of alluded to what I see as the role of the planning board. Obviously, the day-to-day business of the planning board is to ensure the interpretations of the zoning bylaws are consistent with each applicant that comes forward. But I also see a role of the planning board as being forward-looking, predictive, and prospective, looking forward, applying the community principles to say, well, maybe we need to recommend zoning bylaw changes, on our own accord, as opposed to waiting for a potential suitor to come to town to say, well, if zoning were X, then I would build Y, and let's work through that. I see those types of opportunities as the types of things that would come up, in light of, like, Selectman Egan's question, where the zoning bylaw might be vague or might not be clear, or there might be a loophole where you'd want a suitor to come fish out that thing and drive you as a planning board to revise or improve the interpretation of the zoning bylaw in pursuit of that effort. But whole-scale changes of zoning based on, an application of a large scale does not seems to be more reactive than proactive. I think the planning board should be able to take a proactive approach, obviously under the guidance of the selectmen making those recommendations. So while there's that day-to-day business, that proactive approach, working with the Community Development Committee and the new town planner, the planning board has a big role in making setting the town up for future success.
Thanks.
Jason?
I'm going to give you the same one also. But we'll boil it down even more to strong zoning bylaws or very flexible bylaws that put applicants in front of the board for long periods of time.
The answer is descriptive, sufficiently detailed zoning bylaws, if that's your interpretation of strong, to where the planning board is focused on dealing with change management. So if the planning board is finding itself reviewing stuff that is perfectly prescriptive and within the realm of the zoning bylaws, then that does not seem to be the best use of the planning board's time. If the planning board is spending its time reviewing deltas and change and adjudicating on whether that change is appropriate within the guidelines, that's the planning board's time. So if the zoning bylaws need to be improved to minimize the cookie cutter type time spent by residents and petitioners, lawyers, what have you, in front of the planning board, then yes, we need to improve those bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
Terrence?
Yeah, Tom, do you have any, same question I asked William, any personal bias as to what happened in the past here with the town as far as, there's been a lot of discussion about moving Maynard forward and new development. What are your thoughts on the types of businesses you want to see here, the types of housing that you want to see built in Maynard? Do you have any personal preference in one way or another about the way the town's going, or the way you like to see it go, and that you like to support on the planning board, or?
So that's a great question, and the answer to that question is I really don't have any preferences as to what goes in, so long as it fits in the zoning bylaws, right? We have zoning bylaws, and I would see, me personally, I look at, if the zoning bylaws allow it, if the town has voted on it and that's what then that is what can go in. My personal opinion as to whether something should or should not go in there, if it's within the guidelines of the bylaws, that's not my opinion to have as a member of the planning board. That would be like me buying my house on 2 Chandler Street, ripping it down, and then wanting to put up a 4-story, 12-unit condo, and then complaining to you guys that, well, it's residential. Why can't I do that on 2 Chandler Street? It's just residential. Can't you just let me do it? That would be, that's wrong in my eyes. So from looking at the way the town wants to grow and how the town wants to grow, if it's something that's not within the current guidelines of zoning for a particular area, and I'm not an expert on it yet, I hope to become one, but it's again about the risk mitigation and the risk analysis and the hazard analysis, right? What is it going to do to the town if we do this, right? And we have to do that, take that holistic system approach to say if we go bang, 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 then this is the answer to the question. I can tell you that in 5.5 years of being here, that, you know, starting right when we moved in, the high school was the big thing, right? There's been something big, seems like every year since I've been in, that's gotten everybody excited. So having the ability to look at those big projects and lay out the whole sets of pros and cons in a complete sort of way is something that I think would be very helpful in allowing people to then allow their personal opinions to be maybe swayed by more facts than prejudices, biases, and rumors.
Thanks. With the follow-on to that, you used the term agile. So when I hear agile, my business, that's changed, that's adapting on the fly, because it's what's going on in the marketplace or in commerce or in business, whatever term you want to put to it. So did I hear you say you'd be willing to move forward with supporting changes to the bylaws if indeed it worked out for the betterment of the town? You're not stuck on what's in place right now, but you work as a planning board member to maybe review the bylaws as well and offer some advice around maybe
Absolutely,
changes?
absolutely. Yeah, so to me, agile is you have so I come from the software development world, right? I'm an aerospace engineer who spent my life writing software that goes around, flies around on airplanes that go really fast and put warheads on foreheads. And to me, agile is I've got a goal here, and how I get to that goal may change from day to day, but I still have that end goal. What I do next isn't necessarily the thing I thought I was going to do next, but it might be the thing that I need to do next right now. So as you look at the end goal for the town, which I think we've got a lot of energy towards deciding what we want the town to be recently. So now how do we get there? And if there's changes that need to happen to the zoning bylaws to make that happen, then let's do it. If not, then let's make sure we get the right businesses in place to use the zoning bylaws that we have to make the best of the town.
Thank you.
Kevin, can you clarify for us whether or not he would have to leave the CPC if he was on the planning board as well? Or can he be on both?
Yeah, I mean, it's an alternate role in the planning board, but the issue that we're running, it wouldn't address our concerns of the issues they've been having on the CPC, which is quorum. You know, essentially, if you were filling two roles, so ideally, it would be in the best interest of the CPC to have a representative appointed as ad hoc, because it's just going to be a wash. The biggest issue has been getting quorum, particularly because of, you know, the planning board rep and a couple of others, but we would want to enable us to appoint an ad hoc, an at-large representative from the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. Okay, so I think that's the 3 interviews from us. Are there any comments from the audience in regards to any of the 3 candidates? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the question if it isn't possible that we're not kind of locking ourselves in, because it seems to me at one time we had more than one alternate to the planning board. I don't know when the rule got changed. I don't know whether I haven't checked the bylaws and stuff, but it seems to me that you could have more than one alternate to the planning board.
We appointed one a little while ago, Vic. We had another member come in and he got appointed. So
You had an alternate member to the planning board. When he sat at the planning board meeting, they didn't designate that he was the alternate serving as a full-time member. I mentioned that at your meeting. You were appointing him to the full-time position. Now,
Correct.
as far as I know, according to that meeting, we have a full planning board, so we are now talking about alternate to the planning board. And if I remember rightly,
The charter calls for one alternate member.
we had more than one alternate to the planning board.
The current charter calls for one alternate member, as is the case for the zoning board of appeals.
That's what I'm looking for the clarification.
So both the planning board and the ZBA, per charter, have one alternate member.
And that's in the
And
charter.
both positions are currently vacant. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other,
Appreciate the clarification.
any other public comments, concerns? Okay. We have a choice of 3 gentlemen before us. Does anybody have any actions they'd like to take on the board? Motions,
Sure,
nominations?
if I may. Mr. Chairman? Sure, I think in commensurate with what I've been stating since I came on board is I'd love to see Maynard move forward with new faces. So with that, I'd make a motion that we nominate William Gauze as the alternate to the planning board.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Jason, Tim, you guys interested in nominating anyone else for the alternate planning board member?
Yes. I'd like to make a nomination for Thomas Hesbach to be alternate planning board member.
Okay. Do I have a second of that nomination?
I'd be happy to second it for purposes of discussion. And there's no problem in the seconding both nominations, correct?
No.
No, I'll second that.
Okay. Anybody have any comments to make about either of those two, or the fact that there's two
My
people
comment is, I
nominated?
think we're lucky that we have so many candidates now stepping forward to various spots in town. All 3 of these candidates are certainly capable of stepping into to the role that's available. So we're lucky in that aspect. So I think we can't go wrong, regardless of what the decision of the board might be.
Okay, is there any other nominations before we continue to discuss it? Be made. Any comments, Jason? About either? Tim, any comments about either candidate?
Am I allowed to speak on behalf of the nomination for my candidate?
You may speak. Yep.
I learned a little more about him tonight, and I'm very impressed with what I heard. He had a very detailed, oriented approach to everything, and I believe as a planning board member, their review of bylaws and what needs to be done to get to a decision. After having spoken with Bill Nemser when I first got appointed to Selectmen, it seemed his idea of being a town planner and planning board, they all fit together with what Tom has in mind and how he works and operates. And I feel that as a great asset, even though he wouldn't be a full-time member, as an alternate, I believe he brings a lot to the table in that sense.
Okay. My perspective, I think that in support of Mr. Gauze, that we have a gentleman who is, to Terrence's point, fresh eyes, and I think that this town could use some fresh eyes, given the number of stale items that we have hanging out for considerable amounts of time constantly. And I also think that having one who has a legal background would be a significant benefit to our planning board, in that we seem to constantly be hung up in those legal discussions, whether it be large projects or small. It always seems to be that we always end up with in discussions with lawyers and legal people, and I think that that would be a tremendous benefit to the town to have somebody from that standpoint be a part of all those meetings, so we don't end up going to town council every time we have a project big or small in town.
Yeah, I think if there is one issue that tilts the scale, I think Mr. Gauze's experience with the law and with being in front of, in many ways, strategically, it makes sense, and he commented on this when he spoke, about he understands what the, I'll use plaintiff and defendant, what the plaintiff is arguing, and can sort of strategize and help the others understand why the plaintiff might be saying what they are, or the applicant might be saying what they are. So I think that you're right, that's a benefit for the town. And there have been occasions where the town has had attorneys on the planning board, and I think they've been helpful. I remember one in the recent past that was on for just a short period of time that I think was helpful to them in just that way. So I think that for me is probably what tilts the scale in favor of Mr. Gause.
Okay. Terrence?
I'd be comfortable with both Tom or William. I did nominate William. I do believe that his experience dealing with clients who come before boards is something that we could really use. We could use not just a fresh set of eyes from someone who hasn't been involved in the battles of the past, but brings a different perspective from dealing with other municipalities as well. I think it's a good thing for us. I think it's a good thing for the planning board. I think he'd be a good sounding board as an alternate as well, from a guidance standpoint for some of them if they had questions about it, without bias. So but I would just be as comfortable with Tom as well. I think Tom showed a lot of attention to detail tonight. He did his homework as well, so it's good to have multiple candidates. It's like having too many good pitchers, but ultimately somebody has to get on the mound.
As a Red Sox fan, you have no idea what that's like.
Dave's hiding his hat this year, but anyway. No, I think that all three candidates are, and appreciate their willingness to be involved. So, just, we can
Just, I guess we take a vote.
take a vote. Those in favor of appointing William Gause to the planning board, in favor of that? Those opposed to that? Okay, 4-1, and, okay, so, I make a motion to appoint William Gause as an alternate member to the planning board with a term expiring June 30th, 2017.
Second.
Any comments? We've already voted, but we vote again. All those in favor of that appointment?
Is it a different motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gause. Thank you, Mr. Hesbach and Brendan, for your interest and for your time.
Good luck.
Okay.
7.
I know. I gotta find it. Okay. The 7th item on the agenda is a discussion of water and sewer rates with Toby Fetter of Woodard and Curran. Welcome back. I don't think he heard me. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, all.
Good evening.
So, where there's a fair number of new faces, I guess I can, if you'd like, just provide a quick rundown of sort of the history of the water rate setting process and what we've done here.
Please.
Does that sound like a good idea?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we've been working with the town of Maynard on setting rates right now 6 or 7 years, I'd say. And, I mean, water rate setting is not terribly complicated. In effect, you take a look at what your appropriated budgets are, and that comes out of the town warrant every year and is approved at town meeting. And it's basically the attempt to set rates that will effectively raise an amount of money equal to the amount that we're appropriating into the budget. And you do that by taking a look at how much water and sewer you're going to sell in the different tier classes. Here in Maynard, we have a 4-tier system for water. We have a single tier for sewer with out-of-town rates and in-town rates. There's a significant premium for out-of-town customers above what in-town customers pay. And so we've been doing that now for 6 years. We have a good sense of what you sell on a year-to-year basis, and That's the process that we went through early this spring and led to the April 16 memo that I understand you all have. So that said, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. I have looked at the updated financial statements from the end of the last fiscal cycle, meaning the collections, and I still believe that the recommendations therein are valid for the coming fiscal year. I do understand one point of order. I do understand, obviously, that the recommendations in the memo were not adopted prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, so the increase in revenues that would have been expected had the increased sewer rates gone into force for the first quarter of this fiscal cycle will be reduced, even if you do decide to adopt the recommended rates for the remainder of the fiscal year, because we'll only be billing 3 quarters at the increased rates rather than 4.
Kevin, I got a technical question, I guess, or, this is not a rate-setting hearing, correct?
Correct.
So what is the intent of this evening's discussion?
There was a discussion, and the chair wanted to have Mr. Fetter back to go over the recommendations with the board and, to start the dialogue again and move forward with an actual scheduled hearing.
Right. Well, I think the intent was because Terrence has never been part of it, and Tim and I had actually never been part of this process, because when the process was started in April, it was kind of terminated rather abruptly, and we got into a bunch of other questions, and the presentation was never finished. So I was just hoping to have the presentation in full, so that at least Terrence, Tim and myself had the benefit of the full presentation, and, yourself and Jason as well. So that was my intent in asking, because when it came up, I said, well, we didn't get the full presentation, so we'd like the full presentation.
Okay.
So, I mean, the presentation is generally, it's not a highly formalized presentation. It is generally the presentation of the memo. What I can tell you is when we look, as part of the rate setting each year, we go back and we look at the prior year's fiscal performance, and last year we performed basically as we expected to based on that year's recommendations. The way that the rates have evolved here is we were brought in initially 6 or 7 years ago when the town was looking at taking on all of the debt associated with the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and the high degree of uncertainty on what was going to happen with water rates associated with that. So in addition to that, the town also used to make a direct line item appropriation at town meeting into your reserve balances. And that continued for, I think, 2 or 3 years after I began working with you. And then I recommended to the town that we actually drop that practice and just set rates as if we did have that appropriation, because based on the fact that your enterprise funds, the money will just fall into retained earnings or free cash at the end of the fiscal cycle, and then you can either spend it on things or you can appropriate it into reserve balances. In addition to which, at the time, I think the 3rd year, we had accrued pretty significant reserve balances that we felt were appropriate and in line with industry standards, and we didn't feel the need to appropriate directly into those anymore. Now, we maintain the rates at a steady level and continue to accrue some additional retained earnings over the years, but over that 5 or 6 year period, since we had established that, the town has elected to spend a fair chunk of those on capital needs in the water and sewer systems, in addition to which the actual costs of going or running the utilities on both the water and sewer has been creeping up every year in accordance with inflation and the increased operations costs at the treatment plant. And then this fiscal cycle, the sewer budget overall became high enough that we really did need to address basically an increase to reflect the increased costs in comparison to what they had been in, say, 2009. So that's the basis of the recommendation for increased sewer rates.
Tim, do you have any questions regarding the?
So with the drop in water and increase in sewer. How does that compare with surrounding towns? I know there's been a lot of concern in this town that the rates are, people say it's pretty high, but what they don't get is the sewer is actually higher than the water. So how does that compare with the surrounding areas? Are we in a good place? Are we in
There's
the
no
middle?
doubt that Maynard is at the higher end of area wastewater, wastewater discharge rates, and that's strongly correlated with the fact that you have a brand-new plant and are carrying a lot of debt with it in probably the single most highly regulated wastewater discharge basin in the state. You guys discharge into the Suasco Basin, which is probably more heavily regulated for nutrients than I think any other river, although the Blackstone may rival it, I'm not sure. You might know that too. But from the discharge requirements, you guys have, you have very stringent treatment requirements that, if you go and you look at a major city on one of the big rivers like a Lowell or a Lawrence, they don't have to treat their wastewater nearly as cleanly as you do. You're required by the state to treat it to a much higher degree. So that's a big part of why you have unusually high, or not unusually high, but you do have elevated wastewater treatment costs, and it's associated with where we are in the state.
In your numbers that we're looking at from the April documents of April 16th, how does that take into consideration, where does that take into consideration our senior relief program and the...
So it doesn't. I address it in a paragraph at the bottom, because as I was setting rates this year, the spring is when I first heard of the increase in the senior rate relief policies that were adopted last year. Of the 10% or so increase that we need to see on the sewer side, a little over 6% of that is due to the increase in costs directly attributable to the fact that you're going to be spending more this year than you have in previous years. And about 4% of that was associated with the fact that when we abate the bills of some users, other users have to make up for the lost revenue. When we are an enterprise fund, you hate to call it a zero-sum game, but in the end, the rates need to be set to generate the revenues to match the money you're going to spend operating the utility. And so when we look at the overall increase, a big chunk of it is the increase in costs, but a significant chunk of it is because we've made changes to the policies of how we bill people.
Does this make any assumptions regarding expected increased usage? For example, from incoming business at Mill and Main, from
We have a pretty extensive database now on the amount of water and sewer you sell in all of the different tiers. Based on the trends in those, we have not assumed that we're going to start to see increased consumption. When the town really starts to see a durable long-term trend in increased sales on both water and sewer, indeed it will come into play. But from the standpoint of if I just say, well, gosh, we think we have some building in town, I'm going to assume we're going to sell 2.5% more sewer. So that will lower the rates that we set. And in the end, that can put you in a position where you basically end up with a revenue shortfall. And that's from the standpoint where your reserves are no longer what they once were, that probably would not be a prudent action, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I guess to go on to David's last point there, to recognize additional revenues from sales over and above what you're projecting, you do so on the tail end of those sales, after you've seen them and after you start to see those regularly.
That's correct.
You would tailor the rates at that point, rather
Exactly. And the reason we do that, so for a while, after the implosion of the housing market and then the economy going downhill so rapidly in the late aughts, we were seeing a very rapid demand destruction on both water and sewer sales, where people were actively cutting back. That had to be taken into account when we were setting rates, and we haven't seen a reversal of that trend. The trend has stopped here and in many others, and we're basically selling the same amount of water once you account for the changes in irrigation sales on a year-to-year basis. But the underlying trend that was maybe down at 2% a year in the late single digits of this century, that is ended. So we're no longer assuming we're going to sell less water and sewer than we did in prior years, but we don't see a durable trend yet that your sales are increasing in a regular way.
What would be the likelihood if we were to be fully blown out at the Mill and Main project, fully occupied at 129 Parker Street, when we see new uses and whatever, what would be the likelihood, do you think, that you would come in before us and say, you know what, you should reduce your rates?
Well, I mean, that's predicated upon us seeing a real change in the consumption patterns. I mean, I have no, when we set rates, I have no interest in setting them higher than they need to be. I mean, we need to basically pay our bills, we need to maintain a reasonable sized reserve, and beyond that, you have no reason to just be stashing money into a closet somewhere, because that's not what you're doing in any case. So if indeed we were to see a 15% increase in the consumption, I mean, the amount of water and sewer that we sell, indeed, you would be able to reduce your rates and still maintain a financially prudent operation. But that's just not what we're seeing. I mean, I have no idea. You just listed a couple of development projects that I really know nothing about, nor about their potential flow rates. So,
and this is just a technical question.
Sure.
When you are analyzing those types of things, isn't it typical that you would anticipate increased usage or decreased usage based on maybe even just house sales or number of new homes in a particular town or anything along those lines? And if none of that is taken into consideration, then nothing that we do as far as development is concerned is involved in coming up with your formula?
So generally speaking, no, that's not something that would be taken into consideration. It's certainly not in the standard that the AWWA publishes. I mean, when we talk about what the standards are in the industry, it's not about speculating growth. I mean, one thing about a development is, let's say we do have 100 new homes that are going to be occupied and become customers this year. Those will trickle in over the course of the year, and so in effect, you don't get 100 house years worth of consumption that you can just assume is going to start on January 1, or in this case, July 1, in the beginning of your fiscal cycle. I just being that I'm giving a professional recommendation for people on how to maintain a financially viable utility, I would want to see, my father's from Missouri, show me state. I want to see it in real terms. I want to see it in gallons through the meter and dollars billed out the door before I begin to count on it.
Kevin, maybe this question is for you. Based on the agreement we have with the developers of 129 Acton, and the changes they're potentially making to the sewer system, does that help us in any way, shape, or form with, are we losing anything with the way things are now? Is it costing us more to have the sewer rate as it is now without those improvements, or?
You're talking about the infrastructure repairs?
Yeah, the infrastructure repairs.
I guess the result of that project will defer a capital expense at some point that the town would need to pick up. Currently with the way the backups that they're experiencing at the crime lab, et cetera. So that capital improvement piece, whatever the dollar amount ended up being, a couple $100,000, is no longer a cost that the town would have. Aside from that, you're picking up, 18 new homes or users. But yeah, I mean, that project will provide us savings in the potential capital improvement.
Right.
But there's
That's not included in your numbers, correct?
It's not, but that's because, it's an avoidance of a future cost. It's not a cash payment onto the books, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think, to be clear, it's not even on the capital, it wasn't on the capital improvement plan, so that wasn't even a cost recognized in the future.
That's fair. So if I could, Mr. Chair, just to speak to your question with regards to the senior program, some data that I've got regarding effective as of July 21st. Since the policy change for the rate relief in July 1st, 2014, we've added 317 seniors to the senior relief program. Gives us a grand total of 532 seniors, and is approximately about 140,000 plus per year that the rest of the ratepayers need to account for, which makes up that some 4% that
Makes up a
Mr.
portion of the
Federer is
recommended rate increase, no doubt.
talking about.
How much of that 140,000 would be incurred if we had the former senior discount?
We've added 317, total of 532. That delta, what that delta was. Yeah,
The old number of 80,000 is the addition.
there you go.
So to be fair, we're actually talking about, if the purpose of the discussion is to talk about the value of the senior discount, it's an $80,000 discussion, not a $140,000 discussion. Is that accurate?
What I said was accurate. I'm just giving you the total.
No,
Yeah.
I recognize the number is accurate, but
Right.
in reality, what we're talking about, if we're talking about
If you default,
the
default back to
impact,
what was
the
originally.
full
in
impact is
place.
140, but even if we went back to the former discount, the impact that we're talking about is 80,000. If we didn't, if...
According to him. I don't have the number in front of me.
Unless you eliminate the entire program, including what you had for a decade of over 70, then if you eliminate everything, sure, but if you just roll back the 65 to
Yeah,
70.
it's accurate that there's some delta. The specific number.
Then it's 3/5, I guess is the
Yeah.
math. Hit the calculator, it's 3/5 of 140. Or 80,000 is the 65, and 60,000 is the 70 and over.
Who told him to yell? That's, you know,
As I recall, I did work with Marie Mirando, looking at this item during the completion of this year's rate review, and our estimate was it was going to be in the 60 to 80,000 on the sewer side, and I think in the $30,000 to $40,000 impact on the water side.
That's with the old
Right.
assumptions.
Exactly, because of course, the billing database doesn't, that's above and beyond the old assumptions. That's based on the new folks flowing in. So admittedly, the town of Maynard did not have a perfect database when we did our assessment on who would be eligible for this change in practice. So that's why there's the bracket of probable range. It is real money. That's $100 and some odd thousand is real money, and in truth, it's most often, when you see programs like this, they're most often means tested. So we see lots of 41C type of, 41C bill adjustment policies in many locations in Massachusetts, but from the standpoint of just bracketing out a group of folks based on age, that's not something we see very often.
So regardless, the cost is 140 for the point that you're trying to make, right? Whether it was whatever rate we use, this charge right now is 140, that's what we're picking up, is what we're saying.
Under
right? All
the
right.
existing policy, yes.
That's in effect today,
Yes.
so that's the charge, okay. Just clarifying that.
yes, sir.
I have a question or an observation, it's up to you what it is. It seems to me like even though we're not having a rate hearing, we're having a rate hearing. Because there's information being discussed, none of us have a copy of it, we don't know what it is. You've been presented with a rate recommendation, you're discussing it. So whenever there is the required legal hearing for a rate setting, will all this information be included? Or is this sort of a subset of the rate hearing without public information?
All the information we have will be included, and I think the reason why we asked Mr. Federer back was so that we could all, who are new here, get a better understanding of what went into setting the rates and what the numbers, what the numbers that exist are. I don't think anyone suggested we said anything yet.
Well, when you say setting the rates, are you talking about the rate you recommended or last year's rate?
Any rate. We have to set a rate, correct? It doesn't have to be his rates that are in this document. It has to be a rate. Three of us that are sitting here have no idea what the process is, and that's all we're asking.
I
haven't asked,
understand.
no one's, no,
That's not correct.
that's really what we're asking.
I understand what you're saying, but you're working with live numbers proposing apparently a rate increase, and the audience here, as the voters and the ratepayers, have no idea what you're talking about.
I don't know that anybody here has proposed anything other than,
There was a letter dated whatever months ago with a rate.
which is public record, and it was in the last hearing, and it was available when he was here before in April.
Yeah,
It was not a hearing, and this is not a hearing. This is just a discussion.
same information
We don't
was
understand the
presented.
process, and I wanted to have him come in and explain the process to us, so we understood it, because the last time he was here, he started the process, he was interrupted because we had some other information that some people wanted, and we didn't get it at that time. So that's what this is.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so we have to review these numbers again, include the new update, and then we'll have a rate hearing at which everyone will be invited, and everyone will have all the proper paperwork. And my point to you, Mr. Ron, was that nobody here called you out for anything, okay? And to the gentleman to your left, who speaks at almost every meeting, when he wants to speak, he does what you did the second time, and he's addressed.
I apologize, sir.
So, don't mumble when I'm sitting here.
Pardon me?
Don't mumble back and forth when I'm sitting here, because I don't appreciate it.
What do you mean by mumble? I can't talk to the person sitting next to me.
Self-explanatory, my friend.
I can't talk to the person next to me.
Does anybody else have any comments?
Nobody hears anything?
I
Correct.
one, trying to remember what my question was.
Okay.
If you don't remember, I have a quick question. On the spreadsheet on the call, you had some communities also listed in there with their rates as well. One of them jumped out really, really high for quarterly, which is North Attleboro for like 118. What's the difference in your professional experience between a rate like that and our rate? What would account for such a variance in those two towns?
So, I mean, whenever you have an enterprise fund, really, the DOR is telling you need to raise revenues with your rates that are equal to the expenses. So what the reason for North Attleboro having exceedingly high expenses, I'm not sure, but I suspect they probably discharge to a very small receiving water. Or it's also possible that they flow into, and I'm not sure at all, into a regional utility along the lines of what the MWRA does, where say a Quincy flows into the greater Boston collection system. I'm unsure as to why theirs is, but I can tell you that they're not allowed to collect sewer revenues and then put them onto the town's general fund, that those revenues that they have in their rates are appropriate to the amount that they're having to pay in order to treat wastewater.
And I profess my ignorance with this next question because I haven't lived in a city in many, many years. But, so what's the difference between an MWR rate and our rate right now? Are we paying much more versus what an MWRA customer would be paying in your estimation?
Take a quick peek. So,
I know it's apples and oranges because
yeah,
we are
it is apples and oranges,
here.
but I mean, the MWRA has amongst the highest cost water and sewer in the nation. So let me just take a look.
Just trying to get a gauge for how expensive we are in comparison to other communities, regardless of what system they have in place.
Specifically, I know North Attleboro, there's a lot more septic systems. Sewer.
Okay, so the North Attleboro, that's the quarterly charge, the minimum charge, right? So generally speaking, when you have a minimum charge, and I don't know their rates exactly, but generally when you have a minimum charge, this is the minimum you're going to pay, and in that minimum, you're going to get, say, 500 HCF of treatment, and then you pay for any water above that you send to them during that quarter. So their average bill, I suspect, is higher than that quarterly minimum, but generally speaking, when you see, the industry standards are basically recommending a move towards higher quarterly standards or higher quarterly minimums, and the simple reason is the water and sewer industries, when you look at your water utility, probably 96% of the costs it's going to spend in the course of that year are not going to be variable. You vary the amount of chemistry, meaning chemicals that you treat water with based on the amount of water you pump. You vary the amount of electricity you have to pay to pump the water that you treat. But the salaries, whether the salaries are the same, whether you sell 100 gallons or 50 gallons, the debt service is the same, so there is a move in the industry to move towards higher quarterly standards, because in effect, what you're doing is you're setting a minimum income. You're making yourself less susceptible to really rainy years where you see a real demand destruction for irrigation, and you stabilize your income streams using them.
Thank you. That's why this was helpful.
David?
I wanted to ask you what your overall thoughts were of the, lack of a better word, and I don't mean it the way it's going to come out, solvency of Maynard's water and sewer at this point. Are we in trouble?
No.
Okay.
We've reviewed these rates every year. You would have, we've spent, when I say we, the town has spent a fair amount of the reserves doing things, capital upgrades that needed to occur. But from the standpoint of, are you in trouble? No, you're generating enough revenue to cover expenses and add a little bit to your reserves on an annualized basis. And you'll continue to do so as long as as those costs go up, we continue to raise rates appropriately. So.
Yeah, I guess that's where I get hung up. It's like, why raise rates if we're not in trouble? And we have this, money set aside to help us in a one-year cycle where there might be some problems, so why the rush?
So here's what I would say. Different policies for different folks, right? You own a number of very expensive treatment plants on both the water and the wastewater side. If you were to have a big flood, you need reserves. If it floods out the electrical room somewhere, I don't know if it would. I don't know where your electrical stuff is in relation to the floodplain, but when you operate treatment plants, a lot of utilities like to have 6 months worth of revenues in reserve. You don't have anywhere near that. In other cases, for example, in MWRA community where they don't own any treatment plants, they basically buy their water from the MWRA and they send their wastewater to the MWRA. So they don't have a whole lot. In cases like that, really the recommendation from the CPAs who I work with is you should still, in those cases, maintain a minimum of 10% of your annual operating budget in reserves in case something happens, whether it's small pump stations, whether it's a lot more main breaks because of a bad winter. The idea that you should have a multi-million-dollar operating utility that its only option, if it runs into an unforeseen circumstances, to fall back onto the general fund of the town is not a wise operating practice. That's all I would say. So that's why we, especially in light of having spent some of those reserves that we accumulated over a number of years, that's why I don't think that we should be saying, well, if we can possibly scrimp through this year with the same rates as currently, then we will, because it increases the likelihood that you will run into trouble, in my opinion. So.
Any further questions?
No, just to be clear, Toby, you're standing by the
Yes.
the original memo.
Having looked at how all the numbers came in for the closeout of fiscal 14 with the rates that were in force at that time, I stand by the recommendations that are in the memo.
And even more so, because we're a quarter billing behind.
Okay.
Correct?
Yeah, that is true, yeah. I mean, you've, of the increase that the change in sewer rates would have offered you, you've surrendered 25% of it for this current fiscal cycle. And if you don't elect to make the rate changes, which is of course your prerogative, you would end up giving up all of those. But I mean, your sewer operating costs went up by almost $250,000 this year. That money has to come from somewhere.
Anything else, Tim, Terrence?
No.
David?
No, all set.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Toby.
Thank you.
Thanks, so. Spread out. Come up here. John. Yeah. Because that's what Angelo, and he's not on trial. He's on this side of the table. Extra water for you. Oh, you got one.
Good, actually, look at his face.
That's from the water bottle.
20 of.
You see my message?
I did, yeah. I laughed out loud. I just did it. Tim was looking at me. I was cracking up.
Well, the dog ate. Kevin. So the next is a discussion, the next item is a discussion with Capital Group Properties and Attorney Kevin Zarro and our attorney, John Whitten.
So,
Kevin?
Evening.
So, Mr. Chair, as you know, we've tried to work out a timeline as to available dates for both parties to be able to come back and regroup after our last meeting together, which was sometime towards the end of June. At this point, we're still at the open issue from that meeting was a discussion around the affordable housing component at the project. Attorney Whitten was doing some homework and working with the town and with the developer to determine a best case for in lieu of payment as for the town with regards to the affordable units if they weren't to be built on site, if that was an option as an in lieu of payment, or purchasing something else off-site and putting the affordable there and just doing the 158 market rate on-site at the property. So this is, the premise behind this is, one is to try to meet, because we weren't able to schedule a separate meeting, and start to move the project forward and regroup with the conversation on the affordable housing piece and try to come to agreement on that. And then lay out the steps for the project moving forward as it gets to zoning, NBOD updates, and some of the work that the planning board has been working on, and then also the discussion on the development agreement and the steps to get that completed, so. Do you want to?
So I guess, do we have a number?
So, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Sure. So, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Selectmen. So, I've spoken to council today, and I've spoken with Andrew and Kevin in the past couple weeks about a methodology for fees in lieu of. So, as Kevin was saying, an option a developer has, and particularly in this case where it's flexible and negotiable with the Board of Selectmen, is to build the below-market units on-site, to build the below-market units off-site, different location, or to pay fees in lieu of not building them at all. That's a very sought-after option in many projects, not necessarily in this one, but in many projects, developers will prefer to buy their way out of the construction. The question has always been, in a rental project, what does that unit cost? In a for-sale project, we know what it will cost because we know what the sales price has to be. Generally speaking, $185,000 for a 3-bedroom unit. So in my opinion, and I've shared this with Andrew and Kevin, the town would shortchange itself if the purchase price was not the same as the rental price. Because what the town is seeking is the unit. And it's going to cost the town the same amount of money as the developer plus prevailing wage to build the unit. And I shared this with council this morning. So in my opinion, the town of Maynard has the right to ask for the same purchase price, the same price for the rental property as it would for the purchase price, which is about $185,000 plus about 15% markup to pay for prevailing wage. So that would put the cost of each unit over $200,000. Multiply $200,000 times 17, and it's a big number. And the big number was expressed by the Developers Council, I think in a way that would say, and I'll let Angelo speak for himself, that that's not a economically viable proposal for them to accept. And what Angelo said to me, and again, Angelo, correct me if I misspeak, that the applicant is before you tonight to suggest and to offer to build the 17 units within the project itself for a total of 175 units. And if the board is comfortable with that and the applicant's comfortable with that, then the town can move forward with the applicant in the new MOA seeking 175 units, 17 below market within the project. The price may come up at another time, and the Board of Selectmen may wish to explore this in another situation or another instance, but I'm comfortable with that methodology, and again, as I've shared with Andrew and Kevin, there's really no other way to put a value on the rental unit price other than make it akin to the for sale price, because that's what it would cost the town to construct. So I'm happy to explain that further, Mr. Chairman, or answer any questions.
Anybody have any need to have further explanation on that particular piece of the puzzle?
I missed the gist, but I got the gist.
Clarity, 175 includes the 17 proposed affordable units on site?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
If I may comment, Mr. Chairman, I did speak with Attorney Whitten today. We were unaware that this was going to be the subject matter for tonight's meeting until today, so I appreciate the fact that he gave me a heads up. We have absolutely no interest in doing or building off-site affordables. We believe from a financial point of view, a marketing point of view, and from a town point of view, that the 17 affordable units belong within the project that we are proposing at 129 Parker. And we discussed at our last meeting that when we met the actual demand for affordable units in this town. We can build them more economically, we can market them, and we will make these units available to the folks in town who need them, I think at a lot more efficient manner than the town can if the town was to elect to take some sort of a payment to build them elsewhere. As critically, if you follow Attorney Whitten's math, the town would be seeking in excess of $3.5 million from us to build 17 units. That would essentially render our project, the residential project on 129 Parker Street, we wouldn't be able to build it. Okay, it would make absolutely no sense for us to spend $3.6 million to build 17 units somewhere else and to pay that kind of money. So, as Attorney Whitten said, we strongly endorse just sticking with the number of bedrooms and the number of units that the board had sanctioned the last time we were here, and allow us to build our 17 affordable units on site.
Okay.
Quick question. Can you remind me how many rooms are in each affordable housing?
I'll let Bob speak to that. It was 250 bedrooms
Right.
was the cap that you put on it, and I forget the exact breakdown.
I think it might answer your question. This number of affordable housing units were included in the last set of numbers that we approved together.
That's correct.
The 175 was approved.
Okay, so it's
correct.
just,
I just want to know
I think-
the specifics again,
Yeah.
what each bedroom
Yeah,
comes out to what?
you'd be talking roughly 9 one-bedroom units and then 8 two-bedroom units.
9182, okay.
If you look at the RKG report in Dropbox, it has the breakdown too.
right, so the in lieu was just I think it was just an option that was out that it was discussed at the last meeting. It wasn't anything that anyone was insisting, we discussed and we asked Attorney Whitten to tell us the numbers, because last time none of us had an idea what it was. So, I mean, there's really, if we agree that that's what it was, the 5 of us, and that's what you guys agree, we're good.
Right.
And we can now really want to talk about what, the timelines for us getting together to continue to proceed are. I think that was the real, certainly the in lieu of piece was part of the discussion, but the other stuff is more important to, what are our next steps? And, I think that we talked about together, kind of developing a timeline. I think we have to include Bill Nemser at some point, the town planner and the planning board people, but we kind of talked about, what the next steps are, how do we keep moving?
Mr. Chairman, if I may chime in again, it's elemental to this whole process that we move forward on the zoning changes, because without the zoning changes, we can't go forward on what we have discussed as a viable project.
Okay.
We need zoning changes to address the congregate or assisted living component that everyone thought was a good idea. There were some other zoning changes that Bill was working on, and we have commitments from developers, from other builders, especially in connection with the assisted living, who are very anxious to move forward, very anxious to tell you about their project, but we don't, it's not zoned for it yet. So that's the next step, and as you know, to get that done, we have to go through a process with the planning board, okay, and then with town meeting. And our goal would be to get that done sometime in October or November, if that's feasible, but we need to move it forward.
Okay, and Attorney Whitten, or Kevin, maybe one of you two can answer the question. The question I have is it, is it proper or appropriate to, at the same time that that's taking place, to discuss possible adjustments to the MOA and/or, anything else along those lines in the meantime, so that when these things take place, we have the other things ready to go?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, Mr. Chairman. The answer is, in my opinion, yes, it is proper, and it's probably the best way of moving things forward. This is a contract, and a contract can't be signed by the Board of Selectmen outside the public process, so there's the public safeguard. This Board of Selectmen, in the short time I've worked with you, everything has been open and discussed in an open session. That would continue. The board could appoint a subcommittee, and the subcommittee meetings can be posted, so that can continue. But I think at this point, where the applicant and the town have settled on the concept in terms of numbers and size, I think now the detail is the work of counsel, your attorney and the applicant's attorney, and just to iron out some of the wordsmithing, and then that comes back to the board through Kevin and Andrew and the public. So it's a long-winded answer. I think, yes, a lot can be done behind the scenes between Angelo and myself to make sure it's ready for prime time, and we bring it to staff, and then we bring it to the board. And I think that would be the normal process for a complicated project like this, because you really do have many moving parts, and the threshold is town meeting. So I think a lot of work needs to be done prior to the town meeting.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions along those lines for Attorney Whitten or Angelo?
No, I think it has always made sense for the MOA issues, that as long as you understand what our interests are here, that Attorney Whitten and counsel for the developer work together, separate from our discussions for the MOA, because I know that those issues, so I'm on board with the fact, and I expressed it the last meeting, if not the last two meetings, that I was a little disappointed that our planning board hadn't moved forward with taking the steps necessary to get some of these zoning amendments done so that we could start moving. I'm not as optimistic that October is doable, given where we are, but because it has to be a deliberate process where everybody gets to be heard. Otherwise, because I want this to succeed as you guys do, and we have learned lessons, and that's one of the lessons that we learned. So I want to move it forward, and I do think we should give instruction. I know we can't tell them what to do, but I think we should give instruction to the planner to start the process on.
It's currently sitting with Attorney Whitten,
Okay.
who is in the process of reviewing it prior to them, I think. I think their planning board, in particular the town planner, is looking for some feedback on the proposed MBOD changes. And then I don't know if you've had conversation with Bill specifically, but at that point, I would assume that they would start to hold that. To that point, we've started talking about a potential town meeting day for the fall of November 2nd for town-related issues as well. But that hasn't been voted on and discussed yet. And, other than the fact that the planning board knows that there's a fall meeting coming.
Is the fall meeting by charter, or is that flexible for us?
It's flexible.
So, does the planning board meet every 2 weeks still?
Yeah, they typically will meet the second and fourth Tuesday.
So to David's point, that gives them, volumes of history with Capital Group and the project, and 6 meetings between now and, potentially 6 meetings between now and November 2nd. That should be sufficient time to get where we want to get, to make a appropriate proposal to the town for the...
Except it's not just meetings, there's postings that are required with timeliness in the papers and everything else.
I understand that, but it's 13 weeks to quarter of the year. I mean, you know, obviously, if it's not going to be something that is ready, we and they can't do it, but
I don't know what town council's schedule is, but I can't imagine that we can't get a draft done of a zoning amendment in the next 2 weeks, okay? And then I don't know what your internal process would be, but, you know, the zoning amendment is then presented, as you said, Mr. Gavin, at a public hearing through the planning board. The process, we should be able to get on a planning board agenda by the end of September. Once that process is done, we can move right to creating the article for the warrant. The other thing that John and I had discussed, I even believe that Kevin was part of this early on discussion, is that essentially packaging this thing for town meeting, packaging the project, not only going to town meeting with the article on the zoning change, but at the same time, the next article being the concept plan and the MOA, so that we're before town meeting. If they approve the zoning plan, the zoning changes, we then go right into the concept plan based on those zoning changes and the approval of the MOA, all in one meeting, all in one town meeting, and
But you're suggesting that for October?
November. Oh, yes. I don't really think we're that far away. Because once you get the zoning changes done, we know what we want. The change of the concept plan is not going to be that significant. Now, I'm not sure of the process, John, of where we would be sitting and discussing that concept plan with, whether we'll be back with you folks or whether we're doing it with the planning board, but we're ready to do something.
Yeah, I understand that, but we've promised the residents that they will have enough time to digest, understand, learn, be educated on everything that's coming before them. Because the last time, again, I hate to reference it, but we have to learn from the past. And I know, Bob, you agree with me. We don't want to go through the same process and have the same errors that we made the last time. So to suggest that we can, by October or November, the first week in November, educate the public in a manner that they fully understand what the concept is, what the plan is, what this is, what that is, that's really stretching.
Yeah, it is.
Optimistic. And I'm glad to see Bob shake his head in agreement, because we lived it. And we can't live it again. The town of Maynard can't live it again, and nobody should push us. And I hope that you will encourage your council not to push us. You know, we'll move, we want to move. It just has to be moved in a way that makes sense for our community. And I don't think pushing it the way it was pushed the last time makes sense for our community. And we'd be not doing our residents justice.
Well, what are the interim steps that
That's a good
help
point.
educate the public? Because we would participate and be happy to participate in those as well. I mean, the delays that we've occasioned, I mean, it means a lot to us and to my clients and to the owners of this property and to our potential tenants. They just want to see progress, okay? And
I think in many respects, many of the issues that we have to face is our own education of our residents and letting them know why this proposal is better for the town than the last proposal. Why the MOA, once it's created and finalized, we should be able to present that to people and say, look at this, here is how it is better. That doesn't get done in one meeting, that doesn't get done that gets done over time with reporters, with people talking to residents, not in 3 weeks' time. And it's just, we cannot experience that again.
At least that's one thing.
So, Dave, are you suggesting, obviously, the applicant and the town can continue to work, hopefully at the speed we are now, or maybe a little faster than that.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think anybody here is committing to fall town meeting, despite the request. But that if we continue to move forward, get a concept plan, and get a draft MOA going by the early fall, that we then take that time, potentially between now and annual town meeting, or special town meeting in the spring, and use that as a period of time in which to I don't want to say sell the project, because I don't think that's what we're here to do. I think, well, maybe to some
No, it's
degree.
educate.
We're here to educate and explain potentially the pros and cons of this layout.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with that, yeah.
Tim, Terrence?
Annual town meeting, town meeting, sure.
I would just caution falling back on the past again. I think people in this town, as much as David, you're showing some concern about what happened in the past. I understand that. The overwhelming majority of people who approached me earlier this year about getting it done. So as long as we're showing progress, I think that's important. To Jason's point about selling it, I think our job is to sell it. We have to be confident in what this project actually is for the town, and our job is to stand behind it and push it for the town if it's in the town's best interest. If it's not, then obviously we don't do it, right? But at the same time, I really caution us about being so cautionary where we're dragging our feet a little bit because we're afraid of the mistakes that happened in the past. This is a new project in my eyes. This is a complete new opportunity for the town, and a lot more people are unhappy with what happened last time than they are, not wanting this to move forward. So I would just say, committing to a timeline, yeah, probably not the right thing to do today, but let's not throw it out the window right now. I mean, I think there's an opportunity for us to close the gap a little bit quicker here. I think to the chairman's point earlier, what he asked last time, to my memory, was what can we get done in the meantime with these gentlemen to the right of us in concert with the developers and their attorneys that we don't have to wait every 2 weeks to get another step done, right? And then we can start to educate the public. I don't think we have to wait to the very end of the process to come up with 5 artifacts to present to the public. There's information that we could be sharing right now that's public information that people could know about. So, I mean, I think it behooves us to move forward a little bit quicker than we're doing right now. That's what I have to say about it.
I think, just to clarify that, I'm not looking to say a timeline with specific dates. There's going to be specific dates for the next time we get together and that type of thing. But I'm more or less interested in, and it's a public thing too, so it's something that you can also share with anybody you want. Here's the steps kind of in order type of thing. Here's the to-do list, and here's the way it has to go, and here's where we have to get from, August 4th to whether it's November 2nd or some other date. Here's what we have to do to get there. That's what I mean with timeline, an agenda, an agenda for the project, so to speak, so that we are in agreement, the 5 of us, the 2 of you, Attorney Whitten, Kevin, and Andrew, that here's what the goal is, and, at least this body is doing everything we can to get to those goals by following the steps that we put down on a piece of paper somewhere. That's my idea of a timeline, not necessarily specific dates.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with that, and I think we've discussed that this evening with, step 1 is the MOA and getting the MOA really worked in. Step 2 is making sure we move forward on the zoning amendments that we've already discussed and we really need to do. Those 2 things, if we can successfully achieve them by the fall, we've made huge progress compared to where we had been, because we're close now. Then we move forward to the next step, which may be, and granted, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to put a shovel into the ground in the winter, because they wouldn't be anyway. But we can use the winter as the time to then build on to the next step, whatever, and we can with Attorney Whitten's guidance, we can establish exactly what those steps are along the way, so we know, okay, the next thing we have to achieve is X, and let's make sure our council is comfortable with where we are before we proceed into the next step.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, I agree with what everyone has said in terms of the chronology. The applicant knows what project it wants. The Board of Selectmen have conceptually agreed with that project. Now the applicant can take that project to the public, and it can do it through the planning board, through the Board of Selectmen, through any number of means. While that's happening, the MOA can be drafted, the bylaw petition to town meeting can be prepared, and that can be ready for whenever the Board of Selectmen and the town manager would like that done. So it's not a time limitation on my part. So these are simultaneous actions, they're happening at the same time, but explaining to the public what this new project is, that could start tomorrow, because the applicant knows what project it's proposing. So there's no reason not to sequence the advertising of what the applicant is proposing right now, or at a time frame that everyone's comfortable with. Meanwhile, the MOA and the bylaw drafting is behind the scenes just because it's arduous writing material on paper. And then that comes back to the board for your public discussion. So frankly, it could start literally tomorrow.
The only comment that I have on that, John, is that it was my understanding that we have come around to accept your interpretation of the MOA, and that it includes the entirety of the parcel. That's elemental to moving forward on this, and regardless of whether that's a concession or a compromise, okay, that's the way that we're taking it. But we do not have a concept plan with which to go to the planning board to do anything. So I'm losing something here in terms of how can we go to planning board for anything, okay, until we have an understanding of what the concept plan is.
Mr. Chairman, what I would say in response is the project in terms of commercial and residential and square footage and tenancy is at least reached a tentative agreement between the parties.
The essential layout has, yes.
So I think that essential layout will be the foundation of the MOA, and that essential layout can be what is proposed to the public.
Yes.
So, I mean, there may be some details that need to be worked out later. So I think, Angelo, that the MOA can be drafted against that essential layout now with the permission of the selectmen. And meanwhile, we draft the zoning bylaw changes to fit that essential layout so that both parties are comfortable that it meets everyone's needs, there's sufficient protection for the town, and you're getting the project that ultimately you want. I don't think any of that is mutually exclusive. I think they're happening simultaneously. So I would say, if I were in your shoes, get that site plan in a schematic fashion as quickly as possible.
We can have it in a matter of a week or so. In a form that everyone can see and understand.
Okay. One of the things that just the boards, one of the things that I've talked about with Kevin a couple of times and setting a couple of agendas is, at the bottom of our agenda at some point, adding 129 Parker Street to the agenda items as an update bi-weekly, for each meeting. Where are we, what have we done, what's happened in the last couple of weeks? There ought to be, once we get to this point, there ought to be something to discuss every 2 weeks, someone spoke, someone didn't speak, why, what happened, just that type of, high view of it in general items. And then if anybody has any questions or concerns, to David's point about, how are we handling things, how are things being done, it can be discussed at that point every week going forward. I don't think it needs to take more than 2 minutes, but it's, so to add to the agenda so that we have something that we can keep discussing. I mean, in my opinion, being outside the process and having been educated ad nauseum from, Bill Nemser, Ken Estabrook, Brendan Chetwin, and the rest, to have these two guys here is a gigantic step on a Tuesday night, where there's no one in the room throwing arrows at one another. So to me, it's progress already, and that's, what I think the five of us want to keep going is that progress. To David's point, cautiously but continuously. So.
One comment, if we were to add it to the agenda, I would think, for fairness of residents that want to come to our meetings and not sit until the end when we have 129 discussion, I would put it at the beginning of the meeting.
If I'm going to be here, I want company.
People want to be here and comment.
That's fine. We can do that.
I would suggest you put parameters around the discussion then, if you're going to put it in the front, because you're not
Oh, yeah,
going to
well,
the rest of the agenda off for the evening.
It's going to be a.
As Chris said, it was only
The intent is for it to be an update for, the edification of the five of us, for the things that we're not, to discuss, his word is elemental, his is essential. So the elemental and essential things that are going on behind the scenes, it's just to discuss those. It's not an open forum for people to sling arrows at the developer or the town or any of that, and I'll certainly put a stop to it if it gets to that, but it's something that I think we need to add to the agenda.
I agree with you.
But, that's what it is, so, I mean, Angelo and John, I guess the next question is, for you guys, what are, like, say, the next 3 steps? What would be the next 3 steps from the town's perspective, and what would be the next 3 steps from the developer's perspective? Are they the same, are they different? And then how do we start that ball rolling?
I think they're the same, Mr. Chairman. The first, from our perspective, on this side of the table, is the bylaw change. Now, it could be that the applicant petitions town meeting. That's probably the wrong approach. So the way we've discussed it is the town would be the petitioner. The planning board serves a statutory role, but obviously it would be helpful if the planning board supported the petition as well. So first step is the bylaw changes. As Kevin said, Bill has prepared a draft. I am reviewing it, and with the selectmen's permission, I won't share it with the applicant until Kevin and Andrew and I have had a chance to go through it together. But I did mention that to Angelo today, that I did have a draft. So that's the first step from the town's perspective. And then the second step is working with the applicant to prepare the MOU. Because the bylaw changes are to accommodate the project that the selectmen have approved, tentatively. When I say approved, tentatively approved in terms of concept. So step one is the bylaw changes, step two is the MOA, and then step three is probably fine-tuning the concept plan, because the concept plan is going to be part of what town meeting will be asked to approve. Step 2 and 3 might be interchangeable, but that's the sequence, Mr. Chairman, that I would see from the town's perspective.
And I think it's important, I think, from my perspective, for you to understand, I would not anticipate that the zoning request, a change of zoning for assisted living is in any way controversial. And the reason I say that is it was born of a public process that started back a while ago. That is something that people will support. That is something that people want. I don't think there will be any difficulty in getting that through, as long as it's done the right way, which is an open and upfront process. So I anticipate that to pass very easily.
That's just one.
I know that's just one.
Use of the
I know
table,
that.
yeah.
But that particular use is not going to be a problem. So even I don't know where you are in the process of drafting the article, or the bylaw, rather. But as long as and I trust that you will do what's in the best interest of the community, that as long as it is, we're going to pass that without a problem.
Well, that raises kind of a secondary question, which is how to best present the bylaw package to town meeting. And frankly, it's a conversation we can have at any time. Is it one article with subsections that create the project that the parties are seeking to negotiate? Is it several articles? From an applicant's perspective, oftentimes you want several articles in case one loses, in case the Attorney General throws one out, so there's some built-in suspenders. But I think that raises a question that we're going to need to get to, that I haven't even thought about. And you all know that far better than I, is what's the tolerance of town meeting to multiple articles versus one. But to that point, so if the assisted living is a no-brainer, that might be best as a separate article. But I think we need to have that conversation at some point soon.
So you guys agree that those are you agree that that's the next three logical
Absolutely.
steps?
I mean, we've been anticipating that, frankly, since our last meeting. We thought that we would be seeing a draft of that sooner than this, but we can't look backwards, we're looking forward, and within the next couple of weeks, I'm sure that we can have an article that satisfies, an article or articles that satisfy all of us.
Okay, just to be clear, before we, let it fly, is everybody here comfortable with the discussion following the course that Attorney Whitten has suggested between himself and Attorney Catanzaro? Just so that, I want to make sure that everybody here is comfortable with that, and that there's no mistaking that that's what's going to happen.
No, from my perspective, that's been my thought pattern. As far as the MOA is concerned, as long as he has an understanding of our interests.
Let's be clear, obviously, Attorney Whitten's understanding of our interests is to move it forward.
Yes.
There's no acceptance, no sign-off until it comes back to the board,
Correct.
which time we'll have the chance to review it anyway.
Correct, and not...
In the interest to keep you not chasing your tail for 6 months while we work on this.
Yeah, well, the other thing is I don't think that they were limiting the discussion to the MOA. I think that's the largest piece one of the first pieces, but I don't think we're limiting the discussions to the MOA. There's a lot of other issues that we're kind of going to allow them to discuss and hash out
Such as, well, the bylaw issue, the bylaw.
Anything that comes up,
That's-
anything that comes up within the MOA is in those the other items that they're gonna discuss. I mean, we're gonna know what they are before they go anywhere, because we're gonna approve them, but, I don't wanna be surprised, and you don't wanna be surprised that there's other things that come out of
That's
their
correct.
discussions.
That's
But they'll
correct.
come out of their discussions.
And we'll learn about them, and we'll discuss them in public session.
I should add, Mr. Chairman, Angela knows me well enough, and I know Angela well enough. All the conversations between the two of us are conversations between the two of us that carry no legal weight. We're not binding our client, nor could I as a municipality. Municipality can't be bound by its attorney in these kind of settings. So you're going to have to make the decisions, you're going to have to vote, and ultimately, this kind of project, because it's contractual, and because it's a zoning change, has to be approved by town meeting, two-thirds vote for the zoning change. So we have a good working relationship, and it's really just talk until his client signs and you approve and town meeting approves.
Okay.
I had a question. I don't know if he still does.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cranshaw.
Bill Cranshaw, Mockingbird Lane. First off, congrats on finalizing the affordable housing thing. That's good. Secondly, just a reminder to everybody's discussion that, the new charter has lengthened the amount of time between when articles have to be prepared and town meeting. So, you're really, any fall town meeting deadline is, 45 to 60 days prior to that town meeting. So you have weeks to make that happen rather than months to make that happen. That being said, if all you're doing is doing a straightforward tweak to, allowable uses under the existing NBOD, probably got time to do it. But if, you're going to be having a discussion of, here's the new concept plan and, here's the new traffic mitigation stuff, there's no freaking way time to do that.
Anyone else have any comments?
I guess I have one question. I think it's more directed to Kevin. Have we internally, coming out of the last meeting, Attorney Whitten had recommended looking at the MOA for mitigation items and costs. Have we undertaken that? To see if the items were still applicable. If we hadn't asked for mitigation 10 years ago that we
Oh, right,
hit the
yeah,
bullet
yeah.
and already took care of on our own.
No, we're still, we don't have anything
Okay.
to fund at this point.
And I think, just to, if I could, just, Mr. Chairman, just to respond, tag on to what Kevin just said, I don't think you're going to be able to identify that increase until after we see the concept plan. So I think it's prudent to hold off. The MOA can be drafted really with blanks in terms of the numbers. If the applicant and the Board of Selectmen can reach an understanding that the numbers should be higher than they're currently drafted, then you'll know that based on the concept plan. So my advice would be, I don't think we would know today what the mitigation numbers could be until, for example, you voted tonight, or at least conceptually voted, it's 175 units on site. Okay, so now we have a fixed number. Or the square footage for the supermarket, or the square footage for the assisted living. So I think it's okay to let that kind of languish until we see the actual final plan.
So, yeah, just to add to that, there's nothing glaring. They've confirmed the sort of one-time stage money that, if you will, that was paid by the prior owner of the project. We've had that discussion. We've agreed on, those initial phase money that has come in. Beyond that, we're still looking, I think, to Mr. Krill's point is, and this isn't the case, but if the development agreement called out a specific street light to be replaced, and it was, 6 years ago, we've since have done that, and it's no longer an issue, as opposed to, you were going to replace this, and it was X dollars, well, today's dollars is, times X. But yeah, so we're still combing through that to look if there's anything glaring that may no longer be an issue for the town that we could add to something else, or certainly there's going to be a number of I would imagine a number of increases in today's dollar versus when the original development agreement was crafted. So
very good, thank you.
Anything else?
No, sir.
I think that's it for me. For anybody else here? And then we'll just,
So we'll coordinate on the,
Well, we'll chat in the hallway now, and we'll start our process of when we're going to start to communicate and get things going.
so the town planner is actually in Austria this week, but. when he
He's not
gets-
going to be available.
Yeah, he's legit in Austria. But certainly, Attorney Whitten and I will communicate, and when he gets back, we'll try to solidify and touch base on where they are with the NVOD change process and get that rolling. So, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Traffic, I hope is better.
No, that was technical.
You're not sticking around for my parking?
Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I'll talk to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board.
Thanks. Attorney Whitten?
Thanks, Attorney Whitten.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
I'm called John, but I'm formal.
I like these little wins. Get us closer.
So is Aaron here for the downtown parking?
I'm sorry?
Was Aaron here for downtown parking?
No,
Oh, all right.
he's here. It's just out of interest.
All right, good. Well, he could be here as a resident.
He is.
Yeah, all right, good.
They won't.
Am I going to miss anything if I step out now for downtown parking?
I know you don't want to leave.
Hey, you're gonna miss downtown parking.
The whole reason I'm here.
Okay, well, we're on to the next agenda item, just because half the crowd left. So the next item is downtown parking.
I'll let Andrew speak to that as a follow-up to the very high-level peripheral conversation we had at our last meeting. Has since followed up with some data that was provided immediately following that meeting, and is provided in your Dropbox now with a proposal and, at least to get the discussion going. So, Andrew, you want to talk about that?
Sure. I'm going to make an assumption that most of you have glanced through the data. I'm not going to read through it in great detail. We're well aware of our concerns about downtown parking. One of the things that this proposal is attempting to address is that as we move forward with changes at Mill and Main and other downtown redevelopment, we anticipate the parking problem to increase. Currently, we could all sort of argue that, there's good days and bad days, but it's not in a crisis mode. What this proposal is suggesting is that we move towards a place where we're anticipating all that build-out and what the parking the needs might be, and grow with it. The big immediate demands are for parking for employees and parking for downtown residents. There's essentially no parking for downtown residents if their apartment or home doesn't provide it privately. And we have a downtown overnight parking ban, which prevents people from parking in the municipal spaces that they might otherwise. Many communities offer residential parking permits, which create a small revenue stream, but also sort of acknowledge that those cars are legitimately parked there. Gives our law enforcement an opportunity to understand if it's an abandoned vehicle or just a legitimately parked car. In addition to that, there's some municipal spaces now where people are parking. Despite our ban, we haven't been enforcing it in certain locations. This would be an opportunity to sort of rectify that. So that's sort of the big picture. The intention of the parking permits for employees would be to push them off the meters and off the core parking areas around the core of downtown, the basin, and the streets, and put them into the lots that are currently unmetered on the periphery of downtown. Right now, they're going out feeding the meters, but they're also taking up a space that could be otherwise used by a customer. So if we give them a permit, they park in a space that's not metered, it opens up those metered spaces in the core.
Okay.
There's lots of details, but that's the big picture I wanted to share with you and open it up for your questions.
If you put any thought to it, what do you think you'd sell the tags for?
Sell the permits?
The permits for.
So in the proposal, it suggests a $20 to $30 per month, which would generate $25,000 to $35,000 based on 100 permits. And I didn't just make up those numbers. Other communities charge in that range. Essentially, it's $1 a day, if you think of it as a employee fee. There's about 20 business days a year that employees might be working downtown, or $30 if you just considered it a calendar month. And then the annualized is based on an anticipation of about 100 permits being sold. And that's, a number based on the current number of spaces, municipal spaces that aren't metered, that might be appropriate, the number of businesses downtown. There's no way of knowing without launching it exactly how many we'd sell, but I think that's a fair estimate.
Just quickly, I'm not here that often during the day, unfortunately. But I had a conversation down at John's Cleaners with the owner, and he says that end of Main Street during the day is not sparse of parking. In other words, he says there's plenty of spots. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, I had this discussion, and I said, well, that's because people like to park in front of where they're going to shop, and most of the shopping is done down at the other end. Is that accurate? That end?
Yeah, that's accurate.
So is there a way to encourage parking further down on Main? Is there any type of unique approach that can be taken that might lead to someone choosing to park there as opposed to, whether it's, instead of a quarter, it's a dime?
Absolutely. So some of the program anticipates that. The peak demand for our town is nights and weekends. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all day Saturday, not just at night, but even Wednesday nights in the summer when there's concerts and so on. That's when parking downtown is near peak. During the day, the John's Cleaners comment is probably pretty accurate. There's a reasonable amount of turnover in that strip. That will undoubtedly change when the mill is filling up from 700 or 800 employees to several thousand. That will change. And this is part of what we want to anticipate. I would also recommend we charge a lot more for parking. Parking has a real cost to the community, and 25 cents an hour, if you bother to put it in the meter, is cheap. I wouldn't recommend we raise it to $5 an hour, but there's certainly room there to say it's reasonable to charge something more for parking than what we are charging. But in order to get that money, you need to enforce it. Right now, we enforce our parking when our demand is lowest. We need to put in an enforcement program that anticipates those evenings and weekend demands. We can do that in a revenue-neutral way, which isn't all elaborated in here, but we've run the numbers on revenue streams, and in switching out the enforcement, it would be a break-even proposition for the town, but you would get that traffic flowing and turning over when you wanted it to.
Not be using police department's personnel, or is there another?
The program that we would recommend would be essentially meter maids, for lack of a better term, but not full-time officers. Certainly at a lower cost to use dedicated parking enforcement people as opposed to police officers.
Yeah.
Police officers would be part of it, but that dedicated enforcement piece during peak time, you would use civilians.
Do you see that? I mean, are you talking about meters at night?
Sure. You go into Boston and other cities, you pay until 8, 9 p.m. If that's when our demand is, why not charge for it? So to answer Selectman Gavin's question, though, we could install all sorts of different programs. There's amazing technology out there today. There's phone apps that will work off of, you tell it what parking space you're in on your little phone app, and that you're willing to pay for it with your phone app, and the money comes into the town. And the police officer or the civilian enforcement officer walks around with a tablet and says, this guy hasn't paid, I'm going to write him a ticket. But they can just walk down the street and see on their phone app that all these cars have paid for their parking. So that's one technology. It's not whiz-bang. The state of Massachusetts actually sponsors a company called Passport that provides that at no cost to the community. So we could look at that going down that road. There's a lot of details there. Even just smart meters, just the meters themselves can be regulated to charge more at different times of day. And it tells you when you walk up to the meter, hey, it's $1 right now because this is a peak time. It's free, or it's 25 cents because you're way in the outskirts of town.
A lot of them have gone over to the kiosk style where you pay you pay an allotted amount of time, you can add time, you can use a credit card, you print that receipt and put it on the dash, and that's the more common. I think the MBTA commuter rail is actually completely on the commuter rail stuff, not the actual red line bus stations, but the actual commuter rail stations moving forward will no longer accept cash payment boxes. It'll all be via the kiosk and even mobile apps. That's the direction.
The mobile app that the state's sponsoring is called Passport.
Yeah.
And some of these smart meters, if you run out of handicap spaces because people are using them, it will turn the meter blue, and now you have a new handicap space. It knows which spaces are occupied and which ones aren't. So, there's a whole new world of parking out there. I'm not suggesting we embrace all of those changes, but to keep doing it the way we've been doing it since the 1950s seems to be, impractical moving forward. Some folks would like to remove the meters. They think they're unsightly in the downtown. I don't doubt that, but that doesn't eliminate the need to manage our parking in some other way.
And just to add to that, I mean, that point on the chart you have, the bar graph, it's pretty evident that the revenue on both parking meter and ticket collection has dropped down over the last 4 or 5 years.
Is that economic driven or is that enforcement issue? Enforcement driven?
I think it's a combination.
Actually, yeah.
If there's no cars parked at the spaces, there's no need to enforce them. I don't think the level of enforcement's dropped off, just the supply and demand is causing
I
it.
mean, we're going to see a big change in supply and demand soon.
We believe so, that's why I want to get in front of this. Getting in front of it, maybe $20 per monthly permit is the wrong price. Maybe it should be 10, or maybe it should be 40. But we're not going to know until we get out there and sort of try to figure it out. We can dream about it all day long and run the numbers on a spreadsheet. But before we really feel desperate about it, like everybody's clamoring that there's parking problems downtown, we should figure out how we want to manage it.
Okay, so what's the time frame for the beginning of the taking of those spaces downtown? When I mean, this is something we have to pay attention to, and I'm not suggesting it's not, but it's something that we can kind of keep.
For the rail trail?
Yeah, something we can keep working at.
April 16.
Construction.
So we're talking about, it's a 10-month problem.
10 months, so.
Well, to be fair, the construction for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail was awarded last winter, and they haven't broken ground yet. So we anticipate a groundbreaking in this early spring, but we can't guarantee that.
And that's okay, but it's still.
Something to shoot for, right?
With,
Yeah.
with like you're saying, with the luck we have sometimes, probably start on time and we won't have plans, so if we go with the earliest possible date, we're covered. So we gotta.
How they build it too. Do they start down
Have
at
it
the
start
active
at
line and come
post
through and
office,
it might not
yeah.
make it downtown until the following
Well, if
year?
it's not downtown, we could,
Typically, if like, they don't necessarily build from one end or the other, and they go where it's convenient for them, and sometimes they're in the middle. So you might lose all the parking spaces
Yeah, you're
first.
right.
So we've got till, I mean, honestly, you've got till January to decide, because if you're gonna decide to change meters and bring in a new program, you've gotta be a period of time to get the old out and the new in.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm not even in this proposal considering changing the meters, but I think it needs to be on the table for the long term. We could have Carl Nyholm from the police department come in. He's the officer responsible for the meters, and he can talk to you about, how many he has to repair, how frequently, that sort of thing. They are old machines.
It is absolutely.
But that's not what's driving it.
Extremely antiquated system.
So, right.
I mean, if he were to retire tomorrow, there isn't a single person that could repair a meter. I mean, it's just a.
Yeah, but regardless of how we administer in town, there's a number of companies out there that we spoke to, and at the other thing that the conference
MMA.
that we,
Yeah.
they're offering to put in free new meters, and they're looking, they're advertisements. There's an advertisement on it. Why keep the old ones if they're breaking down and they're unreliable? I mean, it saves us money on the repairs. It probably collects us more money.
Yeah, things happen. plows. We had a tough winter this year. We had several damaged posts, if you will. I mean, it's definitely a system that's fading. And as you said, we've been in conversation with vendors that, they're really nominal to no cost to the town. And there's solutions out there that, that are definitely worth looking into.
Tim, did you have a question?
Well, I was gonna say, if we don't have a set date, maybe we could start, get rid of the spots prior to that and let everyone know what's going on. These spots are no longer to be used. Start getting used to it now. But what hasn't been mentioned is that a big issue is the culture. As you said, the 1950s, the way everything's been. It's going to be a culture problem. It's the same way at universities. I served on a parking board for 4 years there, and people will continue to go where they have always gone, because they think they have the right to, or if it's contractually based. It's a cultural issue, and if we're just going to take spots away, I hope our enforcement continues to keep on task with whatever we choose. Despite the complaints, despite the issues, we just got to stick to our guns, because we're not gonna,
to your point,
to meet the demand, so to speak.
They're not gonna have that option.
It's just something I've seen in the past.
Yeah, but
and it kind of translates over.
I understand, but they're not gonna have the option to go there anymore because it's gonna be a bike path. It's gonna be, those spaces are gonna be a bike path. So I understand what you're saying, but
Well, they're gonna try to sneak into the closer spaces, is what I'm saying. They're going to think they have the right to stay close to where their business, their property, if it's permit-based. We just have to continue to keep the enforcement in place, is what I'm saying. When we get
the
there.
program works, it is enforced. And the enforcement doesn't have to be extremely punitive, but it has to be consistent.
Yeah.
We can set our parking fines at $5 or at $25. There's different rates that we're allowed to charge. It doesn't have to be, it's not, we're not doing this for cash flow. We're doing this to facilitate parking. Part of this was prompted by the NBA organization calling us over the winter saying, there's a real problem. The real problem was really related to the snow issues at that moment in time. But we took the time to meet with them and ask them a lot of questions about what their needs were, what they wanted out of parking. Honestly, we got a lot of feedback that they weren't willing to pay for parking. But I don't think that that's something that the town can offer. Parking does have a cost. If we were talking about adding meters where all the unmetered spaces are right now, I don't think there'd be a big hullabaloo about it because we already have the meters. That's not a big change from what we have now. This is, as Tim mentioned, a bigger change.
A lot of them did express a desire for dedicated and employee parking area.
Serendipity is a great example. There's no parking there for that restaurant. Terrific location in a lot of ways, but not if you want to park in front of it. So, I think they may have 2 or 3 employees at any given time. That's 2 or 3 vehicles. We've drawn circles on the maps that were included in the Dropbox, and there's like a 300-foot circle around one of our maps, and you can see the number of spaces within that. 300 feet is a football field. It's not that far to walk, but it's changing that perception. The people that park well more than 100 yards away from them at a mall don't think too much of it, but it's a big deal when you're trying to walk.
Well, and it depends on too, the customer base. I mean, that's the whole intent here is we want to keep those high turnover spaces available. I mean, certainly a football field's a lot to, if you're just going in to pick up your dry cleaner. If you keep that turnover as opposed to, you're spending 3 hours in the downtown to shop and eat. There was a lot of discussion on particularly on the value of those meters there, but what we're seeing, I'll be honest, I see it all up and down Main Street, there is a lot of available space, but what I'm seeing is, particularly as you get closer, down closer to Aubuchon, there's a lot of owner-operator type establishments there that they're all parking at the meter, and they just feed it. They're watching it, or they're just feeding it, and that's their primary parking spot. So you could attempt to pull up in front of that establishment business at any given point, but it's going to have a parking space taken by usually the owner, the
There's a
operator.
limit.
Yeah, but then they go out and throw
If
the
you
money
enforce
back
it.
in, and it's back to the
Yeah, I mean.
No. Over and above what you put in, I thought there was a limit in time.
Yeah, the only one I see enforced that is Cambridge. They chalk your tires if you haven't moved. But, I mean, that's, if the value is added and there's money in the meter,
Does he actually chalk tires?
no, that's not
I
happening.
know they do it in the city, but
They're brutal in
They don't usually have police do that, though.
Cambridge. They don't have police do that.
It's a parking enforcement function when they have like a 2-hour limit. But again, it's all about enforcement.
Yes, sir.
Do we only still have one traffic parking officer?
Yes.
So I think that's the issue, and I told him, he works till, I think, 3 o'clock. The meters are effective till 5 or 6, so I've pulled in and actually had a police officer say to me, don't put any money in, nobody's here. So I think the one issue would be, Mr. Chairman, that somebody has to go around and mark the tires, and like we need to do, know whether that car's been there a certain amount of time. If we only have one person, it's possibly impossible or very difficult.
Yeah, and to be fair, it isn't the only thing he does. He is a member of the actual department, so if there's a need for backup or a response to somewhere, he goes to those as well. The majority of his time, he's in the downtown area and policing meters and things like that, but oftentimes, he's taking a vehicle over to MHQ, he's taking a vehicle to Jarmo's to be serviced, so there's a lot of, variables there, as being a sworn officer. They use him as part of the shift, so.
But I think to Ron's point, and to Andrew's point, if we don't enforce it, attitudes will not change. And I've told the same story at length to anybody who will listen about a little town in Pennsylvania that you can't drive more than 25 because everybody's scared to death. I've never seen the cops there, but I know that if you go more than 25, you'll get a ticket. There's something to be said for reputation, and if we, I go downtown on a Saturday, and this has happened more than once, and I go into a store and go, hey, can I break $1? And they go, oh, Carl doesn't work on Saturdays, you don't have to worry about it. Like, okay. That defeats the purpose. Because I guess we saw a proposal tonight from Andrew that obviously we need to talk a little bit more about going forward, but the other piece I see is that we now have a parking lot with 32 spaces in it that's sitting fallow because we don't really know how we want to handle it.
And we have a 40-space lot that's being used extensively without any enforcement.
My only point was, if you're looking, you've made the point that we don't know how it's going to work until we try it. Well, you have 32 pilot spots, in my opinion, if the rest of the board members agree, to go out and sort of run a test on this and see how, a residential permit might work, or an employee permit system might work. I don't know how anybody else feels about that. I just assume do something over continuing to wait and analyze and.
Oh, no, I don't have a problem moving forward with,
Where's the 40-space lot again?
Railroad Street.
It's not a lot.
40 spaces on the street
Yeah, but
that are being used by residents, but it's a municipal lot.
are you talking behind the post office?
No, along
Actual street?
behind Maynard House of
And what
Pizza.
number of those are going to be
Yeah.
gone?
Excuse me?
What number are they going to lose?
There's 40 spaces.
But aren't they going to lose some of them to the bike?
No, that particular portion of Railroad Street, they will not lose spaces, but the lot behind the post office, which is also a municipally managed lot, will lose some spaces. I believe there's 23 on that lot. It's in the chart.
I think they lose
And they're
12.
losing about half of them.
Any idea where the Railroad Street people park in the winter?
They park on Railroad Street.
They still park there?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's spaces, dedicated spaces, correct? It's
Yeah.
not, they're not parking in front of their house on the curb, they're,
But there's not overnight parking on street.
It's not enforced, and in fact, there are signs on telephone poles in front of the spots that say it's private permit parking only.
And there's
Call the
actual,
landlord, and he denies that he put the signs up.
but he did admit that he painted the numbers on the street that coincide with the units.
Oh, really?
So he didn't put the signs up, but he did put the numbers on the street.
We should follow Mr. Curran's approach,
Yeah.
painting the public streets.
Yes.
So I'd like to suggest that we consider those 3 lots for the pilot. We already have an issue with who's responsible for the lots, who's going to maintain them. They're sort of in the public, but they're not in the public. And they will not negatively impact the overall downtown parking because they're on the periphery.
Which 3 lots?
The River Street lot, the Railroad Street spaces, and the post office lot. I don't know if we have a proper name for that, but
Number 2 on the map.
/ post office.
2 Post Office Square, I think, something like that.
What is this?
and,
It says 2
Number 2.
Carl, K-A-R-L, Post Office. Railroad Street, they have a different name. They get different names on these things.
I need to blame Mr. Nemser for this. He insisted we name the lots, and they're all named for Marx.
One of the Marx Brothers. He's beautiful.
I don't remember Epsilon, the Marx brother.
Harpo, Carl, Gummo,
The town
Zeppo,
lots are named for the
Broder.
Marx brothers.
So, okay. But it,
so is the
so,
plan, sorry.
go ahead, Jason.
I was gonna say, Andrew, if we pilot in this study, I assume you're looking at doing a pilot of residential parking passes only?
I think that the 23 River Street
Could be done as
be offered to
Businesses.
employees.
Yeah.
And we'd certainly want to market it to downtown, because I believe the pilot will work over time. We'll figure out the right way
Sure.
to do it. But I think something like this is going to happen. And so if we start embracing the folks downtown, that, you know, permit parking will allow you to park here, kind of have a dedicated space. You can count on it even when the downtown's flooded with business. Some people will take advantage of that.
Okay.
And I mean, it was the original premise, was that we looked at that lot specifically for business and employee parking.
Correct.
So so a parking pilot program in those 3 addresses.
If we do that, then the enforcement can be left with the police for 24/7. The chief's already agreed that, you know, he would work with his shifts to get enforcement being done around the clock on those lots. And then
My concern is the Railroad Street one, because, I mean, those are residents that have no place else to go.
I think we can get the money out of the landlord, though.
So,
You know, he'll add it to the rent or eat it in the rent, and acknowledging the fact that we're plowing it,
Yeah, behind the post office will be in the same
Providing
situation.
to David's,
What's that?
to
Behind
David's,
the post office was gonna be in the same situation,
they're
but
the same thing. They're coming from those other buildings.
right?
they also need to come up with a plan anyway, because they're gonna lose those spaces.
Has that landlord been spoken to, the ones that
Well, they're
people?
all in individual
It's the same guy.
condos.
Oh,
And they've all been given notice, yeah, with regards to the rail trail. I haven't seen or heard from any of them,
but
including
as far
Railroad
as the
Street.
parking spot
As
going
a-
away,
As a butter impacts, they were all given notice with regards to 25% and 75% design hearing
What,
for the rail trail.
what kind of notice?
Same one every other abutter gets.
Yeah.
Legal notices we
Legal.
send out to the abutters,
Certified.
certified letter.
Yep.
One of the things, we've also spoken to Mill and Main about perhaps working with them to help us through storm parking issues. And they didn't make a firm commitment, but I believe we're going to be able to work something out where, for instance, those with parking permits can park in their lots while we're clearing ours, you know, for some 2-hour period of time. You know, we'll come to some understanding on it. They understood the impact and the way they might be able to help us, and they see the downtown parking issue as part of what they bring to the downtown as well.
the post office square issue has been around since the 80s, where there was a discussion of issuing municipal permits to those condo units, back when they did the redevelopment initially, and there's no evidence that, that was ever actually, there was documentation written up, but no evidence that they actually issued permits, but
Our intention would be to reach out to each of the abutting landholders, have this conversation, very upfront.
Okay.
Set a date for implementation and move forward. For the River Street, there's also some abutting properties that might be interested in the parking, as well as the entire downtown business district. We're reaching out to the business district on with other topics, so we can sort of roll it up into a big discussion there.
so just kind of an issue I have with this as a whole, related to specifically the River Street project. I'm not personally in favor of purchasing property to address the row house's issue of, for $20 a month, they take care of their parking needs. And so I think if we go down that route with River Street, I mean, we purchased the property, they just as well could have purchased the property. In fact, I think they were leveraging that we would. So I'm not interested in purchasing River Street property for the 10 or 12 cars that they have to park there. So I think, I don't look for the board to some direction if you want to allow residential parking there, but, we certainly can do that, but it shouldn't be an open-ended, whoever comes to the door first. I mean, we should have a cap on, residential parking there, because the intent was for the businesses and the downtown businesses, and it may not be needed now, but weekends and restaurants that, that have a longer duration that they can have.
Right on the street.
They used to park at Walnut Street. There was the Clock Tower lot, and, the Mill and Main ownership is, with that ownership change, they gave them notice, they're no longer allowed to park on private property, and they no longer park there, so now, I don't know where, there's
Parking on River Street.
parking on River Street.
River
yeah.
Street's got about 18 or 20 spaces lined and unlined on the street. That'll become a problem in the winter.
It will.
I mean, but that-
I've noticed some issues with, because of the narrow nature of that street, and when school is in session, we're going to have a problem with kids running to Boys and Girls, the Boy Scouts have their thing right in the church, and they often come running right out.
Yep.
And parking there, that could be a dangerous situation, but
I'd be open to, hear what the board thinks, but I just hate to, spend that kind of money on a project that, the intent behind it, isn't gonna be seen, if it's gonna be essentially a wash.
well, I think we start with the plan to go with just the downtown business employees and work from there.
Is that a discriminatory thing?
No?
No.
You hope?
No, it's I mean, it is how we said it.
Do we have a sign to post saying that this is municipal parking or what, or
We will, once.
permit parking only?
Yeah, we're trying to, once the determination was made, we've already cost it and done it. It's just a matter of, okay, this is what we're gonna do and post it. We've looked at the lighting, the asphalt conditions, all that with regards to, all that's good. I just, if we wanna, the original discussion was, let's not just open it up, because once people start parking there, we're never gonna get them out of there. Kind of to Tim's point, they're gonna be accustomed to parking there, and 3 months later, the town's gonna come along and say, you no longer can park there. So we've had it closed off till we've made a determination, and if the determination is some amount of residential, and the majority businesses, or all businesses, or a mix, I just think, for that particular lot, we should have, if we do allow residential, there should be a cap on it, not 32 spaces. And
Do we know if Saracen is like, not that I'm looking for anyone to break the law, but, or break the rules, but are they actively driving, is their security group going through there and towing cars if they're parked there illegally overnight?
other than that, I don't know. They do have
They have
security
people that
on-site
park there to go to
presence.
the gym over there and
Yeah.
and there's business people that park there.
Yeah, I don't believe that Mill and Main issues their tenants parking passes, so it would be tough to identify somebody that may be visiting a business inside versus,
Yeah.
you know, they don't have their tenant employee parking designated areas either. So it'd be
They do have
tough to,
24/7 security.
yeah, that they have.
And it's possible they put somebody through there at night. And
It's a million
if the
square
cars don't
feet
have a
of.
mill permit on them at night, they're not an employee.
And, but they don't have mill permit parking, right?
We don't know.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think,
okay.
I don't believe they
Because I'm
do.
thinking, what if somebody works for a business and has gone on a business trip? And they
Yeah.
have their car there overnight? Towed.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or they could be like companies I've worked for where if you're gonna leave your car there, you leave your license plate number and security
Right.
knows that it's your car, so.
Right. So I guess that's not our problem, but
We know we got calls from people that were parking there that are residential neighbors who called us when they got kicked out and asked us where they were supposed to park.
It got bad to the point where people had vehicles there that hadn't moved in a year.
I saw one.
To the tone of
there,
one that was.
damaged and everything else.
Damaged via snow, and it still hadn't moved months after the snow had melted, so that was probably the driver behind, hey, what are we doing with this lot, I would imagine.
So what is your direction that has you understand it on this issue?
I think we're good. I think we'll move forward with a pilot permitting system for those lots, and we'll start to engage the necessary folks. We'll come up with an effective date. The easier one, is the River Street lot. I mean, it's essentially ready to go. The other piece is, the impact and discussion with residents.
Yeah, we're gonna have to meet with
Yeah.
residents and
But Railroad Street, I mean, it's a matter of getting the physical signs and some
couple of weeks.
tags, and we should be in good shape. Maybe September 1.
Have at it.
And then police enforcement.
Okay,
Good luck.
September 1st.
Yeah, we're done with that. We only got 2 minutes left, so you better hurry up. The town administrator review process. The town administrator review process was not completed as it was supposed to be completed previously, so I think we need to readdress the issue. And I guess it's kind of my responsibility, but I just want some feedback from you guys on how do you want me to proceed with it? And do you want me to collect the same data? And I don't know if anybody saved the information they gave to Bill, if everyone saved it or not.
I don't know if I have mine, but
We can
Bill,
do
I
it.
think, had collated it. If you contact Bill,
I don't know what Bill's done. I just assume ask you guys before we start asking Bill any questions. Part of the process is everyone's supposed to have an interview with Kevin, because how can you evaluate him without doing an interview? And I don't know that part of the process is taking place. And so my question was gonna be, do you wanna do the same thing you did with Bill and give it to me to go through it and do it? Or we can sit and go through it individually with each other? Any way you guys wanna do it, but we've kinda gotta get it done, and it's already 2 months behind, according to the charter, so we need to get it done. I will send Bill an email tomorrow, and ask him if he has the information, but
Hope he does, because I hand wrote it all. I don't have any.
You good on
yeah,
that?
he has it. I know he has
Good
it.
on all that?
I thought he had I thought he had put it all together and,
well, he had.
I know he's willing to do that and finalize that, and even though, I think you should have that conversation with Bill, because I think you'll find it's almost virtually done
It's only a pilot.
as far as the written aspect.
It wouldn't hurt.
The problem I have with that is that I have to submit it now, because he didn't. So I'm not willing to submit his words, is part of my problem. So I have to submit it, because he didn't.
But I think if you speak to him about the way he was going about it, typically what has happened in the past,
I'm not interested in typically what's happened in the past, David. I'm interested in what I have to do, and I have to submit it, not Bill. And I'm not gonna submit Bill's words, because because in case you weren't listening, when we were sitting in a room together, Bill and I didn't exactly see eye to eye on certain things. So I'm not gonna go with Bill's words. So the question is, do you guys have copies of what you submitted to Bill, or do you want me to get them from Bill?
I think you should get them from Bill.
Okay. And then the end of the process is that you guys are supposed to talk to him and Kevin, and interview Kevin personally as part of that process, and that wasn't done. So that has to be done by anybody that didn't do it as part of the initial process.
That was recommended, it wasn't necessarily, we weren't necessarily told to do it, it was recommended. It was an option, as it was phrased.
I don't know that it was an option. It was not.
The way
it was
Bill
not-
phrased it when he
It
handed
wasn't
out.
phrased as an option to me. It was, I was told I had to do it, so I did it. And that was the way I took it, so. I will look it up in the paperwork that we got before and see whether it's an option or not, and I'll let you know, but I'll talk to Bill and see if I can get the information from him, but I'm certainly not gonna submit to the town his words with my name on it.
Understood.
So that's that. Economic development update?
All right, keep it short in the interest of minimizing a 16-hour day. Met with 3 separate business developers in the past week, all interested in downtown properties. Just kind of high-level discussion of specific locations and, some options that they may have, but it at least showed that there's interest in some folks to do some stuff with some of the either current vacancies or expected vacancies of some locations. I think everybody's aware, obviously the board is aware of the recent vacancy, July 1, of the Maurice Tavern, the expected soon vacancy of the Gruber's Furniture location, and we're still getting some specific answers and discussion around the expected vacancy of Aubuchon Hardware and where they stand with the recent engagement at the former Ace Hardware in Stowe. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts, particularly with the downtown, and but on the flip side of that, we are meeting with folks that have come in and have at least engaged with us and floating around some ideas. So the EDC meeting, the Economic Development Committee meeting was today. They did not have a quorum, but there was 6 folks in attendance, and I'm told they had a healthy discussion about business recruitment efforts in moving that forward.
Karen, can I quickly ask you to go back, when you're talking about the businesses and business interests? If I remember correctly, in the packet, there was a letter from the DPH, Department of Mental Health, or Department of Health, or whatever,
Yes.
in Massachusetts, that expressed an interest in your community, but I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there was a series of communities.
Right.
Is that something we're going to reach out to?
We have to the glaring ones that were at the time. So we forwarded that to Mill and Main, particularly at that time when it came out. It was forwarded. Carrie, their leasing director, was going to reach out to them and let them know what they had for available space.
How about up the place that they're moving from to the mill?
Yeah, we're still trying to get our hands around what's going on there. But you're talking about the Stratus
Building, yeah.
yeah.
It's not going to be vacated till
March, anyway.
late winter, early spring.
What was the deadline for DPH?
I believe it's in August to put in the application. They're going to be looking to occupy probably sooner than that, but I'm not positive. The issue Mill and Main had with the grant proposal was they were requiring about 60 dedicated parking spaces, and they weren't sure that they could accommodate that with their other plans at a location close enough to an appropriate building.
Certainly,
DPH is
Stratus
going to be
could
having
in the right.
clients come in. That's why they wanted the dedicated parking.
Yeah. I just wouldn't want to miss that opportunity.
Yeah, when we received it, that was, the first, place to kind of float it around and see if they have
Okay.
any interest.
All right, sorry to interrupt.
So will we have that done by August 12th?
What's that?
Do we have something to offer them by August 12th? The deadline for that was is August 12th.
For DPH?
Right.
It's not for us. It's an opportunity for companies
Okay.
like Saracen and others that have office space to rent.
Okay.
The only way it's for us really is to make those companies aware
Right.
that the opportunity exists.
Certainly. From a recruitment and
Are
marketing
there any,
standpoint.
is there anyone have an intent to do it other than just Mill and Main, or?
I believe they're going to put the application in despite the
Parking issue.
the issue with parking that they probably wouldn't be able to accommodate all of. You don't know what other companies are going to say yes to or no to, or what they're going to charge. Grand App is this is what we want, not what we're willing to settle for.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was realistically, that was the only location that could accommodate it. Now, with the recent unveiling of them moving, that, could be of another potential location, but I don't know, timing-wise, if it would work out, and what their ultimate plans are for that location. So, yeah, that's all I got there.
Your report.
Yep. Rail trail easements are in hand, 6 out of the 14 that we need. We definitely know that there'll be 2 takings that we're going to need to do for 2 of the locations. And the 3 others are scheduled next week. We anticipate getting those 3 others in hand by next week. And then there's still a few that we're dealing with some minor stuff. One in particular is a waiting of the 129 Acton Street and the Attorney General's office with that decision, or at least with the timeline of the advertising hearing. So we still have that in line for the 18th, right?
That's correct. Yeah, Linda expects to have everything sewed up by the end of next week, but
Yeah. So the August 18th meeting will include, as we talked about, it's sort of our deadline meeting for that process. Representative Hogan's district office is officially open, effective August 1st here in the lower level behind the Veterans Service Office. This is prior to where Greg Lefter used to sit as the facilities manager, right, sort of in the back of Wayne, the Veterans Office. It's primarily staffed, going to be staffed for a few hours a week by Jordan Eldridge, and he's the district director. Representative Hogan in the past has had office space in the building, but hasn't really had the staff to, she essentially opened it up and didn't really have the time, as much time herself to physically be here, and didn't have the staffing levels, but under her new role as the chair of public health and as a more seasoned member, she's actually gained additional staff folks, and that allows Jordan to be out of the State House more frequently and to actually have a presence in the district. So we're excited to have Representative Hogan and her staff available to not only the town but the town residents, and it's a great relationship. It has been in the past, and I think it will even be better now, having that representation here. She is planning on a open house for September 15th, which is the same evening that we're planning for the firefighter ceremony, some new pinning, badging, if you will, of the new firefighter hires. She's planning to be in attendance, as she usually is, with a proclamation, but also coinciding with that, she's kind of doing a little bit of a informal, somewhat open house that same evening. The liquor license bill was engrossed in the House on July 30th. It now moves over to the Senate to be vetted. So it's made its way through the House and is now over to the Senate. And that was, like I said, as effective of July 30th was the last update there.
There's actually a vote?
Yes. We continue with the fire and dispatch union negotiations. We're hoping to, at some point, I don't know that we'll get through this month, but
I think we're going to be real close.
we're getting there with finalizing those. I would suspect a meeting in September will be at least close to bringing it back to the board and hopefully for ratification. For that, again, the dispatch union is a newly formalized union. The fire union agreement expired on June 30th. We're negotiating a successor agreement. Open Table is officially heading to Sudbury for the time being. We've had some conversations with them potentially about Maynard possibly providing some chargeback for van service if the demand warrants it. So if they're seeing a demand for transportation needs, there's a way that we could provide van service and have a chargeback to Open Table to get residents over to the location in Sudbury. The other item I have, last thing I have on my list is the 10 Main Street McDonald Development Project. There's a hard deadline in place for September 7th, at which time there'll be, the building commissioner has issued to the DPW, the engineer, building commissioner, the town planner all met out on site on July 29th, and then the building commissioner prepared a formal letter that was actually sent today, I believe, right, 8/4, with regards to a hard deadline of September 7th, and would be $1,000 per unit per day fine if not met, and the specific outstanding items are in relation to some sidewalk improvements, both on town and private, underground garage deficiencies that were noted, as well as paving and striping of the lot itself.
Kevin, quickly, the fine that you mentioned, is that something that that is like codified, or is that something that he just comes up with a number and?
It's codified, but the collection of it, you know, if it hits that point, it then would have to, he'd have to file a complaint in, you know, in district court.
But but it
is
he has the
codified.
authority
Yes.
to, okay.
To leverage the fines are codified, yeah.
Okay.
He also doesn't have a certificate of occupancy on the entire building yet, so in addition to the fine, he would be holding up the dentist office and the additional apartments that are not yet rented. So there's some real money on the table.
And to that point, it's the same developer, but a different project. The project at Waltham and Parker Street is substantially complete, albeit not complete, in the sense that we have not been requested to give final sign-off on the project. It was the end of last week, his electrician was doing final wiring of the posts that went in. I'm not certain that Eversource has actually charged them as of yet, but they are installed, and effectively everything out there is done, but it has not been signed off on as of yet.
Do you know, and if you don't, that's okay, but those posts and the lamp posts seem awfully close to the edge of the road. Is there any type of restriction on how far off the roadway they have to be? I think
I don't believe so.
I anticipate a problem with plowing.
Yeah.
Plowing comes down, they're gonna knock them over.
Yeah, I'm not aware. Do
Okay.
you know Jason, anything?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to remember the planning board decision. I don't think, they're in accordance with the plan that he had proposed.
Yeah, actually, kind of look nice.
I think they look nice too, they're just right on the edge of the road.
Yeah. But the brickwork, you know, the other stuff that had the trees and mulching, some of that sort of final. So to the driving by into the eye, you know, pretty much substantially looks complete, but it has not been signed off yet by the DPW.
So we'll consider it complete upon DPW sign off?
Yes.
Okay. What I want to make sure is that while it should have been done a month ago, that, you know, we're not hanging one person for Eversource's inability to ever get anywhere on time.
Yeah, no, I've spoken directly to Wayne Amico and Chris, both of them have said if they were requested to sign off on it as of, like, literally as of, like, the beginning of this week, then they would see it as substantially complete, because the final electrical wiring was done. Prior to that, it was the posts weren't in, the wiring wasn't done. Now, at this point, it's just, it is literally would be literally out of the developer's hands, and that he's just waiting on the utility. And if that's the case, then, we would see that as a substantially completed project, but.
And because, and I hate to drag this on, but because he hasn't signed off, is there an ongoing penalty?
Yes.
There is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at this point, it's, our council has written a letter, they've written a response, and we'll end up getting filed back to court for a ruling on the judgment, so. That's all.
Okay. So in regards to the postings, there's a new system in place to ensure that we don't have the same problem we had with the 129 Acton Street, the postings at times. So
Yes.
That's just for, I knew that, but if that's just for everybody else, there's
Yeah.
a new system in place to ensure that, catch safe, to make sure that those things are posted on time, so. We got in trouble with the Attorney General because something wasn't posted appropriately, or they suggest it wasn't appropriately posted. We suggested we had posted it appropriately, and there was no date stamp on it, right? So that's
Right.
changed. The way it's done has changed anyways, to keep that from happening in the future. And then so you guys know, and I guess Terrence will know eventually, that we had a meeting with the school chairwoman and the superintendent, Kevin and I. It's an annual thing, a leadership meeting quarterly. We had the first one, and we talked about the school and the school's budget in broad terms. And one of the things that we talked about was a more transparent process than had been in the past. So if you guys have any questions or concerns that you want Kevin and I to share with them, that the next meeting's not scheduled, but just let me know and I'll share your concerns, your questions. But one of the things we talked about was specifically the letter that we receive every year, the 2 weeks after the budget meeting, where they ask for the same amount of money every year and that they didn't get this year. But, what's that for and that type of stuff, that, being that there's myself and Terrence and Tim are new to that process as well, that there might be more questions for them that they might have had in the past. So we just kind of made that clear, and that the questions are more for our own education than for prying into their autonomous budget, as I believe was the word they used.
Yes.
So just so you guys are aware, if you have any questions or any concerns about it, in general terms, I'll be happy to bring them to Don Capello and Superintendent Girardi's attention and get answers for you. The next thing it came up in this meeting tonight. Can you get for us the actual number of days? What are the actual number of days that we have to have something prepared before it can be eligible to go to town meeting?
Yeah, under the new charter.
Under the new charter, there's a timeline?
Yeah.
What is that number of days? We just need an answer for that, so we'll know when we start moving forward. I don't need it now, but when we get it. He suggested 45, so
It might have been that the annual and special were made the same, because it's always been 30.
And the last thing that I had was,
Special has always been 30, annual has been 45,
okay.
so.
All right, so the last thing that I had was, for you guys to pass along to Chris Okafor and those guys, it was that I had somebody approach me and tell me that they've been going to the Glenwood Cemetery for many, many years to visit, deceased relatives and place flower on their graves and whatnot. And the woman was raving about the condition of our cemetery, how fantastic it looked and how great it looked, so.
It's good to hear.
That would be nice to have Chris and those guys not get punched every time, so if you want to pass that along, that would be nice. And that's all I have for a report. And so I guess the board reports. Tim?
I have nothing.
David,
I'm ready to go. All set.
go home?
Yes.
You're ready to go home, okay.
We'll just make a decision on our own.
I thought you were gonna be ready to
Decision on our own.
have some else.
Oh, Jason's got a
Decision on
chance.
our own.
Jason,
Yeah, I have a couple, I'll make them quick.
That's
What charter is this for?
very special.
It's actually Kevin.
Sorry.
The correspondence, there was an exceedance at the treatment facility due to a failure of some equipment. You can go back and take a look, if I could get an update at some point.
Okay,
I'm just curious if that was addressed.
okay.
I believe it was a gate failure and an E. coli.
Yeah.
It's in the discharge.
Typically, all those, I get CC'd on a DEP response. I haven't seen anything. I do meet with Chris tomorrow, though, so I'll get an update on that.
That's fine. And actually, David, you got the other one about, did we respond to the state? So, I'm all set.
with that, I think we can adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?